Dungeon Master Madaram 125. Information. When Takashi Madaram came to, he found himself inside a pitch-dark cave. There was no exit, just earth all around, and the only thing in front of him was a single glowing stone. When he touched the stone, letters floated into view, reading, "Welcome, Dungeon Master." For some reason, I've become a Dungeon Master. I figured I might as well try running the dungeon, but the place is full of incomprehensible rules, leaving me completely tied down. To make matters worse, there is a big city nearby, and at this rate, my dungeon will be conquered in no time. Back in my old world, I was a hopeless gambling addict. So, instead of having adventurers conquer my dungeon, I decided to have them tackle something else entirely. 1. The Birth of Dungeon Master Madaram. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. When Takashi Madaram came to, he found himself inside a pitch-dark cave. There was no exit, just earth all around, and the only thing in front of him was a single glowing stone. When he touched the stone, letters floated into view, reading, "Welcome, Dungeon Master." For some reason, I've become a Dungeon Master. I figured I might as well try running the dungeon, but the place is full of incomprehensible rules, leaving me completely tied down. To make matters worse, there is a massive city nearby, and at this rate, my dungeon will be conquered in no time. Back in my old world, I was a hopeless gambling addict. So, instead of having adventurers conquer my dungeon, I decided to have them tackle something else entirely. The Birth of Dungeon Master Madaram. What is this place? Where am I? What the hell? When I came to, I was lying in what looked like a cave. I didn't understand a thing. I could feel myself starting to panic, so I forced myself to focus. Calm down. Calm down, Takashi Madaram. Stay calm. Handle things logically, no matter the situation. I talked to myself, an old method to stay grounded by looking at the situation objectively. Okay, start with what you remember. What happened last? I was in my apartment, and I remember going out late at night because I was hungry. Right, after I left. Yeah, there was this blinding light all of a sudden, probably high beams from a truck or something. So, did I get hit by a car? I quickly checked my body, but nothing hurt. Besides, even if someone hit me and ran, they wouldn't dump me in a place like this. Could it have been loan sharks? Truth is, I'm addicted to gambling. So much so, it's fair to call it a full-blown addiction. I dropped out of college because of it. And once my parents found out, they cut me off financially. Even then, I couldn't stop, and the debt piled up to a ridiculous amount. The place I frequented was an illegal casino run by the Yakuza. Maybe the loan sharks finally had enough and decided to kidnap me. Would the Yakuza really go this far? I mean, what even is this? A rock. Right in front of me was a massive stone sphere, at least a meter in diameter. It sat on a pedestal and emitted a soft, blue glow. I'd never seen anything like it, but thanks to the faint light, I could make out some of the surroundings. Relying on that pale glow, I looked around for an exit, but there was nothing that even resembled a way out. Wait. There's no exit? The area around me was like a hollowed-out dome, and there wasn't a single opening that looked like a door or tunnel. I wasn't mistaken. Aside from the glowing sphere, there was nothing here, no furniture, no objects, no cover. And the room was tiny, barely 6 tatami mats in size. Even this weak light reached every corner, making it painfully clear, there was no way out. More importantly, what is this glowing stone? I'd never seen anything like it, but I figured it wasn't dangerous, so I reached out and touched it. The moment I did, the glow intensified, and strange letters appeared above the sphere. I'd never seen this writing before, but somehow, I could read it without any trouble. Welcome, Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master. I had no idea why, but that's exactly what it said. And just like that, for some reason, I'd apparently become a Dungeon Master. 2. Various creations. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Various creations. In front of the glowing sphere with the strange letters, I froze for a while. None of this made any sense. What's going on here? I asked the question aloud, but of course, There was no one to answer. When I touched the sphere again, the welcome message disappeared, and 4 new lines of text appeared. Create dungeon, create monster, create item, create object. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I didn't get it. But create probably meant I could make something. Monsters and items I can understand, and I guess objects too, but what does dungeon mean in this context? I traced my finger over the word dungeon. The letters moved upward, and in the space below them, a new diagram appeared. It showed a hemispherical shape in the center. At its core was a red sphere, and beside it, outlined in blue light, was a humanoid figure. The blue humanoid was moving, just slightly. Wait. Is that supposed to be me? I stepped back a little, and the blue figure mirrored my movement. Apparently, the dome-shaped graphic represented the room I was in, and the red sphere symbolized the glowing orb in front of me. Touching the orb seemed to allow interactions like a smartphone, and I could now view the space in 3D. This is insane. Tech like this actually exists. It looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. It was incredible, no doubt about that. But still, so what am I supposed to do with this? I understood the interface, but not the purpose. If I was expected to do something, they could have at least left a manual. It was so advanced, it was actually hard to use. I guess I'll just have to learn by touching things and experimenting. It felt risky, but there was no way out of this room. Sooner or later, I'd have to interact with it anyway. For now, I decided to gather whatever information I could. The first notable thing was the number displayed in the bottom right corner of the interface, exactly 100,000 P. I didn't know what P stood for, but I assumed it meant points. I tried touching the red sphere first, but nothing happened. Then I tapped on the humanoid shape, presumably representing me, but still, no reaction. Next, I touched the dome-shaped outline that made up the room. This time, I could move it around as if I were dragging it with my finger. Just when I thought I was starting to understand how it worked, a loud noise came from above. Alarmed, I looked up. There was now a large hole in the ceiling. About a meter wide. That definitely hasn't been there a moment ago. Wait. What? Seriously? I compared the section I had just manipulated with the ceiling. The hole lined up exactly with the spot I had touched on the diagram. I must have triggered the hole to open by interacting with the interface. There was no other explanation. It wasn't a trick or hidden mechanism. It was practically magic. It looked like this whole thing was the real deal. No way. This is legit. A dungeon? Since the words Dungeon Master had appeared earlier, I guess that meant I was supposed to create a dungeon using this thing. It felt like I was in a game. Now that I checked again, the number in the corner had dropped by 1. It now read 99,999 P. I must have spent a point opening that hole. Well, at least that means I can make a way out. If I could make holes in the ceiling, I could eventually dig my way to the surface. Good news, but I wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. No way they'd give me this kind of power and let me escape so easily. It wouldn't surprise me if my head exploded the moment I tried to run. Better to explore everything carefully before doing anything reckless. But seriously, what should I even do here? I fiddled with the interface some more and found that, like a touch screen, I could zoom in and out of the map. Zooming out revealed what looked like the surface. So this really was underground. Let's see. If the ceiling is about 3 meters high, and judging by the map scale, then the surface must be about 30 meters up. It was a rough estimate, just gauging with my fingers, but it seemed about right. I zoomed out even further to study the surrounding area. Apparently, I was near the base of a mountain. A forest stretched out ahead, and a little further away was a river. Is that a road? A short distance from the mountain, I spotted what looked like a road. Following it on the map, I saw a wall. A big one, circular in shape, enclosing a cluster of buildings. A town. Zooming in on the town revealed humanoid figures moving around. The place had the atmosphere of medieval Europe. I couldn't tell what the buildings were made of exactly, but most looked like brick houses. There were carts moving through the streets, but no cars, no traffic lights. It didn't seem like they had a very high level of technology. Well, at least there are people nearby. Part of me wanted to open a path to the town and go there right away, but I decided against it. After all, I was a dungeon master. I didn't know what that meant in this world, but I doubted it would earn me any goodwill. Especially if I had the power to summon monsters, I might be seen as something evil. Better to observe for now. I could head to town later, after I found out what else I could actually do. Guess I'll start with items. Thinking it was the safest option, I tapped on Create Item. The screen changed again, displaying various icons. There were things that looked like coins or currency, weapons like swords, armor, shields, and helmets. Bottles filled with liquid were lined up too. I picked a sword for now, which brought up a new menu for materials. Not just copper, iron, and steel, there were also metals from games and fantasy novels like mithril and adamantite. Even more names I didn't recognize filled the list. Yup, this is a game world all right. It seemed better to throw out Earth's common sense and fully switch into gamer mode. They've even got Orichalcum. The Orichalcum sword, with its fancy name, required a whopping 100 million points to make. It was grayed out and unavailable to me. Most powerful sounding metals cost a ton of points, clearly meant to be out of reach for now. I went with iron for now. The screen changed again, letting me adjust attributes like durability and sharpness. I could even alter the blade's shape or give it magical properties like fire or electricity. Of course, those all cost extra points. I chose not to change anything and stuck with the default iron sword. Cost, only 10 points. When I pressed the confirm button, a sword appeared out of nowhere and dropped to the floor with a clatter. I picked it up and drew it from its sheath. The pale blue light from the orb reflected off its silver blade. Whoa! Even in this bizarre situation, my heart skipped a beat like an excited kid. It was the first time I'd ever held a real blade this size. I gave it a light swing. Heavier than expected. If I didn't brace myself, I could easily lose my balance. Okay, this isn't the time to be playing around. No one was watching, but it still felt a bit embarrassing. Still, now I knew I could really create items. I could make clothes and shoes too. The bottles seemed to be healing potions. I wasn't sure how effective they were, but in this situation, they probably worked decently. I also discovered I could make food, toilet paper, a toothbrush, and other everyday items, even pens and paper. Those must have been meant for me while living here. At least I wouldn't need to worry about food, clothing, or shelter. Apparently, I wasn't limited to standard templates either. I could create things I imagined, but those cost more than pre-designed items. There were also some materials that were extremely expensive. Processed metals or wooden goods weren't too bad, but petroleum-based or chemical products, astronomically high in cost. I tried creating a polyester shirt as a test, and it required hundreds of times more points than a regular one. Probably because petroleum products didn't exist in this world. Trying to create something that doesn't exist here jacks up the point cost significantly. Annoying, but maybe it was a safeguard to prevent mass-producing out-of-place artifacts, or parts. But there are loopholes. Petroleum and chemical products cost a lot, sure. But thin iron sheets, perfectly even glass, and pure white paper? Those could be made with surprisingly low point costs. I had only been here for about 30 minutes, and I still didn't know what the outside world looked like. But assuming it was at a medieval level, these kinds of items should be rare. To mass-produce thin iron sheets, you'd need blast furnaces and massive rollers. Perfectly even glass would be difficult, and making pure white paper would take serious bleaching work. Still, they could technically be made here, if a skilled craftsman put in the effort. So the system ignores technical difficulty and effort. Even if something existed in this world but was hard to mass-produce, I could still create it cheaply. The system's point calculations were a bit vague. I wasn't sure how this loophole would help yet, but knowing it existed could be useful. Next, I checked out Create Object. One touch, and I immediately got it. This was pure game logic. It let me create decorative or functional dungeon objects, treasure chests, doors, columns, sculptures. I could even make small fountains. Traps, spinning floors, and other gimmicks were also categorized as objects. The stronger or more elaborate the trap, the more points it cost. Interestingly, I could also make terrain features. Ponds or streams for water zones. Magma for volcanic zones. Trees for jungle zones. Of course, things like flowing water or molten lava needed a huge number of points, not just to place, but to maintain. They required constant point consumption. If I added them without thinking, I'd run out of points fast. I tried making a treasure chest as a test. I could pick the material, shape, add a lock or trap, lots of options. I chose the cheapest, a plain wooden box. Opening it, I found it empty. So I placed the iron sword I'd made earlier inside. Just like items, objects could also be created based on my own imagination. And apparently, both items and objects could be duplicated. As long as I had the original, I could copy it. The more I duplicated an item, the less it cost per unit. That meant I could stock up on food and daily necessities by copying them. I was starting to get the hang of it, but the real challenge still lay ahead. Monsters. Create monster. No matter how you looked at it, this one was clearly dangerous. But there was no way I could ignore it forever. 3. A cute furball. Its name is Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. A cute furball. Its name is. When I nervously tapped on the Create Monster option, a list of preset monster types appeared. Seeing them helped me relax a little. This one's pretty easy to understand too. There were amorphous types like slimes, as well as rat-like, cat-like, and dog-like creatures. Bird types were available, along with humanoid ones, skeletons, and zombies. All the classic monsters you'd expect from a game. There were also large creatures like dragons, but even the smallest horse-sized one cost 50,000 points, half of what I had. There was no way I could afford something like that right now. Apparently, I could also assign abilities and adjust stats. But the number of parameters was on another level compared to items and objects. There were basic attributes like durability and strength, as well as toughness, agility, intelligence, and magic power, standard RPG stuff. There were also less common ones like cognition and fertility. You could also adjust things like skin toughness, the sharpness of fangs or claws, or even add poison stingers or venom sacs. It was almost too much to take in. To get a feel for it, I selected a rat-type monster and started playing with its stats. I see, the stats are correlated. Rat-type monsters could have high agility for relatively low point cost, but raising their health or strength took a lot more points. On the other hand, larger monsters were easier to boost in strength and durability, but agility was harder to raise. Makes sense, I guess. It wouldn't make sense to create a tiny rat that could lift an elephant, or a massive elephant that could move like a mouse. The system discouraged such extreme builds by making them inefficient. But honestly, it might be best not to mess with the stats too much. Living creatures are made up of delicate balances. If I tried to strengthen only one aspect without considering the whole, I might end up creating something that dies the moment it spawns. Wasting precious points like that would be tragic. It might be best to stick to the defaults and just add minor skills or abilities. However, I also learned that the stronger the monster, the more expensive it became to add abilities. So the dilemma was this: should I invest heavily in weak monsters by giving them lots of abilities, or pour points into strong monsters and keep them basic? It was a tricky balance to strike. For now, guess I'll try creating something simple. Honestly, I was nervous. I wanted to believe the monsters I created wouldn't turn on me, but they were still monsters. Anything could happen. Maybe I'll go with something original. Rat types were quick and kind of scary. Plus, if I got bitten, I'd worry about diseases. Slimes and skeletons weren't necessarily weak just because they were in games. For safety's sake, I decided to design something extremely weak. First, I made the body palm-sized, small as possible. Round, no protrusions, and covered in fur. Then I added thin wire-like arms and legs. No mouth, I didn't want to risk being bitten. What I ended up with looked like a greyish puffball, with scribble-like limbs. Something that could have come from a child's doodle. To be extra cautious, I set its stats to the absolute minimum. Strength and agility were all set to 1. I didn't know what 1 really meant in this system, but with values that low, it was unlikely to be dangerous. It cost just 1 point to make. Literally the cheapest, weakest monster possible. It probably wouldn't even survive on its own, but apparently, I could adjust stats even after creation. I could also add abilities or append features like horns or tails later. If something didn't work, I could tweak it then. And at just one point, I wouldn't lose much if it failed. Alright, this should be fine. My heart was pounding, but there was no way to make it any weaker than this. Just as I was about to create it, one final prompt appeared. As this is your first time, you may grant intelligence level 10 to the monster free of charge. Would you like to apply intelligence? Intelligence, huh? As the message implied, it seemed to mean granting the creature intelligence. Now that I thought about it, there had been an intelligence stat. After checking a few things, I noticed that weak monsters usually had an intelligence of 1 or 2. For beasts like lions, it went up to about 4. Humanoid monsters had intelligence levels ranging from 6 to 10. But monsters with intelligence level 10 were outrageously expensive, at least 80,000 points, even for the cheapest ones. Compared to other skills, it was priced absurdly high. When I looked into the skill further, I found that monsters with intelligence often had abilities like communication and speech. Apparently, they'd be able to talk. I see. So it's like a navigator. I'd been struggling without a manual, but maybe this thing was designed to be an advisor to support the dungeon master. Alright, let's go with it. I chose to grant it intelligence and pressed the confirm button. Just like with items and objects, light gathered, and the monster was born from it. Whoa, it worked. Even though I made it myself, it really did just look like a ball of fur. But it was clearly alive, standing up and moving its thin limbs. Wow, it moved. So? Can you talk? I tried asking, but there was no response. Was that whole "it can talk" thing a lie? Can you hear me? If you can, please respond. I tried talking to it a few more times, but there was still no reply. The furball just kept wobbling around and even toppled over. It didn't seem capable of proper movement yet. After a while, though, the creature began moving its tiny hands in a purposeful way. It seemed to be gesturing something. It pointed repeatedly at its own body and traced something. Following the motion, I realized it was trying to draw a face. It especially focused on the mouth area. Oh. Of course. The mouth. You can't talk without one. I'd left it without a mouth to make sure it couldn't bite me, but obviously, no mouth meant no speaking either. I hurriedly spent another point to add a small mouth. How's that? Can you speak? Ah, thank goodness. I can talk now. The voice came through clearly. The mouth seemed to work. I'm feeling. By the way, Master, are you here somewhere? Even as I was talking, the creature continued speaking over me. I cannot tell if you are present. Without eyes, I cannot see where you are, and without ears, I cannot hear your instructions. Please, grant me eyes and ears. The furball politely pleaded with me. Right, I'd forgotten about that too. I quickly added eyes, a pair of triangular ears, and a small nose for good measure. All of that cost only one more point, cheap enough. Ah, now I can see Master's face. Well then, Master, allow me to properly introduce myself. Thank you for creating me. Please feel free to give me any orders. Polite. Very polite. I'm glad I made it. My name is Madaram. Good to meet you. So, do you have a name? Since I made it from scratch, it didn't belong to any particular species. I gave it intelligence, but I doubted it came with a name. No, I do not. Please call me whatever you wish. Alright, then I'll name you. Since you look like a furball, how about Kerima? It was a pretty lazy name, but these things are all about gut feeling. Thank you for the lovely name, Master Madaram. It seemed to like it. The truth is, Kerima, I just became a dungeon master. I don't know anything about how this all works. What do you think I should do? Understood. I only know the basics myself, but I will support you to the best of my ability. Finally, things were starting to move forward. Note, the monster's name, Kerima, is derived from furball. The translation keeps it as Kerima to preserve the pun, and the explanation, since you look like a furball, clarifies the connection for English readers. 4. How to build a dungeon. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. How to build a dungeon. So then, where shall I begin? The tiny Kerima asked me. Let's start from the beginning. What exactly is a dungeon master? What am I supposed to do? I figured we'd begin with the basics. The ABCs. A dungeon master is someone who protects the object, the dungeon core, while luring humans into the dungeon, killing them, absorbing the mana released from their bodies, and using it to expand the dungeon. Just as I vaguely imagined, it was a pretty gruesome job. Lure people in and kill them. And what is mana? Mana is the energy possessed by all living beings in this world. The dungeon core is a device that can gather mana from nearby life forms. Using this collected mana, the dungeon master can expand the dungeon, increase the number of monsters, and install traps to repel intruders. So it's the same thing as the points used to create monsters and items. Why do I need to gather mana? Who created this whole dungeon master system? That was the core of the matter. A dungeon core or monsters don't just appear naturally. Something, or someone, had to create them. There's no way something like this could just come into existence on its own. That I do not know. I'm not able to answer that. Karama couldn't respond. But from the way it phrased that, it wasn't that it didn't know, it simply hadn't been told. Whoever created this system didn't seem keen on answering my questions. Well, I suppose it's natural not to give out unnecessary information. However, a goal has been set. Once the total asset value of the dungeon, including all monsters, items, and other contents, reaches 10 billion points, that will be considered the target. 10 billion points, huh? I couldn't tell if that was a lot or a little. So what happens if I reach 10 billion points? The first dungeon master to reach 10 billion points will be granted dominion over this world. Karama stated it plainly. Ruler of the world, huh? Sounds like a grand dream, I replied without much interest. There's no doubt that whoever created this system possesses supernatural powers. Just look at the ability to create items or monsters at will. But the way they abducted me into this world without consent makes them pretty hard to trust. Whatever. For now, let's just aim for that 10 billion. I might not trust them, but complaining won't change anything. I might as well play along with the game for now. So, what's the first step? I asked my fluffy little advisor about the next move. Before we get into that, how about we expand this room a little? It's a bit cramped for conversation. Karama made the suggestion. True enough. The space was tight and not exactly conducive to a long discussion. If this was going to be a long-term base, it should at least be comfortable. The ceiling height is fine as is, but let's straighten the walls and ceiling. If you touch the core while imagining a straight line, you should be able to draw one. Following the instructions, I touched the dungeon core and, sure enough, I could draw straight lines. Using about 3 points, I expanded the room to the size of 10 tatami mats and reshaped it into a square chamber. It's a little bare, so let's apply some wallpaper to the walls and ceiling. A light gray should be appropriate. I picked the cheapest wallpaper and applied it. All I had to do was select it, and it went up automatically. Very convenient. It's a bit dim, so let's install a lighting object on the ceiling. Again following Karama's advice, I selected a light fixture from the objects menu and installed a mana-powered lamp. How's that? Yes, an excellent result. It was basically just clearing a tutorial, but I managed it without messing up, so that was good enough. Standing while talking is a bit awkward, so let's create a table and some chairs as well. That made sense too. These might be long-term essentials, so I didn't skimp and picked a slightly nicer set. A white cushion chair and table combo. I sat down and placed Karama on the table. Now then, let me explain the ways to acquire mana. There are 3 main methods. One of them is killing humans, right? Karama had just told me that earlier. Correct. And if you're targeting them, it's better to go after powerful humans. Through training, humans can accumulate large amounts of mana. So it's like experience points in a game. The stronger they are, the bigger the reward. Still, I wasn't exactly eager about the idea of killing people. But humans, especially adventurers who make a living by hunting monsters, will come to destroy the dungeon core in order to stop the dungeon. The destruction of the dungeon core means the death of the dungeon. And by extension, the death of its master. That's a pretty major detail to just drop casually. If this thing gets destroyed, I die too? Looks like I can't afford to be naive about not wanting to kill anyone. Master, if you attract too many powerful humans, your dungeon may be conquered and the core destroyed. So moderation is key, Huh? Yes, exactly so, Keramo affirmed with a nod. The second method is absorbing mana from the surrounding plants and animals. Absorbing? Yes. The core can collect mana not just from inside the dungeon, but also from the surrounding environment. Of course, the amount gained from plants and insects is quite small, around 10 points a day. The points that were accumulated at the start were gathered little by little from the surroundings over time. 10 points a day. Since there were 100,000 points at the beginning, that would mean it's taken nearly 30 years to build up. Overall, it's a small amount and doesn't compare to what you can get from humans, but it might be enough to cover the maintenance cost of objects like lighting or water. Every little bit adds up. I'll keep that in the back of my mind. And the third method is absorbing mana from humans. So, without killing them? Correct. Humans contain far more mana than other plants or animals. Simply having them inside the dungeon can yield a substantial amount. The amount varies depending on the individual, but if an average-level adventurer stays in the dungeon for about an hour, you can expect to gain around 10 points. So, using something like a long, winding maze to store them would be an efficient approach. At my comment, Keramo bowed and nodded its whole body in agreement. I probably should have given it a neck, but the gesture was cute, so I'll leave it for now. Still, 10 points in an hour. Compared to a full day of waiting for the same from plants and insects, humans really are efficient. And if that same average adventurer is killed in the dungeon, how many points would that yield? Approximately 10,000 points. 10,000? That's 1,000 times more. Killing definitely yields more. But if I want to reach 10 billion points, I'd have to kill 1 million people. 1 million people. Isn't that basically an impossible game? I don't know what kind of world this is, but based on the technology level, it feels like a medieval setting. The population likely isn't that high. I doubt there are 1 million people in the surrounding area. But there's always a loophole in any system. What if I capture humans and keep them living inside the dungeon? Even if it's less efficient, if I can steadily gain points from them over time, it could be worth it. The human farm plan. It sounds terrible, but if I just build a prison and keep them there, I could earn points 24/7. I could make up the amount gained from killing in about 40 days. Capturing one person would bring in about 80,000 points a year. If I caught 10,000, I could bring in 800 million annually. That means it would take less than 15 years to hit 10 billion. I'm afraid that would be difficult. There may be dungeon masters who try such methods, but they likely don't succeed. You see, mana is the expression of life. It responds to the holder's emotions. When someone feels intense excitement, anger, relief, joy, or ecstasy, mana is released in greater quantities. I see. So fighting enemies and getting hurt stirs fear, and winning brings relief. Then finding treasure brings joy. It's the emotional spikes that generate the most mana. However, captives chained in a prison become emotionally dulled. They don't produce quality mana. Some dungeon masters go as far as to torture humans to extract mana, but the moment I heard torture, a wave of disgust hit me. I don't want to do that. Even if it's for the sake of points, deliberately causing that much suffering is going too far. I wouldn't recommend it either. Besides, it's dangerous. Dangerous? Ignoring the ethics for a second, isn't it a fairly easy way to earn points? Capture people, torture them to extract mana, and then kill them. If you're focused purely on efficiency, that's the way to go. It may be efficient, but how would that look to outsiders? A dungeon that captures humans, treats them like livestock, tortures them, how do you think people would respond? Ah, right. That would definitely make us a target. If I heard about a dungeon like that, I'd do everything I could to wipe it out. And people who get killed never return, but those who are captured can be rescued. Their friends and family would fight like hell to get them back. It's best not to earn unnecessary hatred. Also, it's impossible to make a dungeon that can never be conquered. Huh? You sure? I can think of ways to do it, like disconnecting the dungeon cow from the main path and sealing it off completely. Making a door that can never be opened. Filling the floor with traps and monsters. Or even flooding the whole level with poison gas to instantly kill intruders. I just thought of 3 options off the top of my head. If I really brainstormed, I'm sure I could come up with plenty more. No, there's a rule. All dungeons must be designed in a way that they can be conquered. That's part of the dungeon rules. Dungeon rules? What the hell is that? And now we've got some mysterious new system to worry about. 5. Dungeon rules. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Dungeon rules. Dungeon rules are the mandatory guidelines one must follow when constructing a dungeon. Hearing that, I couldn't help but snort. What? That's ridiculous. Who decided on something like that? What's the point of setting such rules and following them? Who benefits? I'm afraid I cannot answer that. I simply don't know. It seems the mysterious higher entity set these rules. Annoying as hell, but there's no point in blaming Kerama. Well, whatever. Just explain them to me. First, the dungeon must be connected to the dungeon core via a passageway. And just like that, my clever plan got shot down. Time to poke at the details. Then what if I connect it with a really narrow corridor, like, just a few dozen centimeters wide, too small for anyone to pass through? There are regulations regarding the size of the passage. There's no upper limit, but the minimum required height and width is 6 meters. So, an impassable corridor won't do. 6 meters wide is about the size of a 2-lane road. It's pretty spacious, but probably the minimum needed for fighting with weapons. Fine then, what about a door? I'll lock it and keep the key with me. That should make it secure. Doors are a staple in dungeons. I know you can create locked doors from the object menu, so this one should work. You may lock doors, but the item required to open them must be placed inside a designated treasure chest on the same floor. What if I hide the key in a wall, or give it to a monster that keeps moving around? That is not allowed. All I could do was grimace. Then I'll use riddles. A code that opens the door. I'll make it unsolvable. No hints, completely random codes, or something like name the final digit of pi. Nobody in the world could solve that. That's not allowed either. If you include riddles, they must go through a strict review process. Fairness and solvability are absolute requirements. In fact, the rules state that any puzzle must be solvable by at least 60% of challenges. That's way too easy. A puzzle that 6 out of 10 people can solve is basically worthless. What's the point? If you still want to raise the difficulty, you must include the answer or hints somewhere on the same floor. Hearing hints sparked another idea. Then what if I include a lot of hints? Hide a tree in a forest. If I flood the place with irrelevant hints, no one will be able to find the real one. No. All hints and answers must be presented on standardized stone tablets. You are not allowed to create extra, fake ones. Every idea I came up with got shot down one after another. Also, you're not allowed to fill the place with traps. There's a limit. Traps can only cover up to 5% of the dungeon's total floor area. Additionally, each trap must be spaced at least 50 meters apart. Then what if I make the traps trigger each other in a chain reaction? Set them up so that once one goes off, the rest follow. That way there's no escape. That is prohibited. Traps must be triggered by external stimuli only. Furthermore, every trap must have a method of being either disabled or avoided. For example, a narrow corridor with a rolling boulder triggered from behind, ending in a locked door. That sort of design is not permitted. I was actually planning something exactly like that. Guess the real makers were ahead of me. Also, areas like scorching hot zones or underwater zones count as a single large trap. They're exempt from the 5% floor space rule, but no other traps can be installed within them. So many things I'm not allowed to do. Aren't adventurers supposed to be our enemies? Why the hell are we going so far out of our way to accommodate them? I'm sorry. I don't have an answer to that. Kerama apologized. I couldn't blame him. And thinking about it calmly, maybe it made sense. They say in castle sieges, the attackers need triple the numbers of the defenders. We don't know how many adventurers will show up at once, but if it's fewer than 10, and we fully fortify the place, we'd likely win every time. If every dungeon master fortified perfectly, the human side would have no way of winning. They'd stop trying to conquer and just seal the dungeons instead. And with no mana coming in, the only thing waiting for dungeon masters would be slow starvation. The rules that bind dungeon masters are what make dungeons sustainable in the first place. Frustrating, yes, but I guess it's a necessary evil. Can't we find a way to get around those rules? The rules are embedded in the dungeon core, so you can't create anything that violates them. Karamu explained that violating the rules is impossible. But on the flip side, if you're able to create something, it means the dungeon has allowed it. I leaned back in the chair, deep in thought. Most ideas that come to mind easily have probably already been accounted for. But no system is perfect. Even the item creation feature had its flaws. There must be loopholes in these rules too. I'll just have to take my time and find them. Alright, then next, tell me about monsters. There were strict rules for dungeon construction and traps. But what about monsters? There are no rules governing monster placement. As you may have noticed already, the only limitation is cost. Creating powerful monsters requires more points, and adding abilities increases that cost further. But as long as you have the points, you can create monsters as strong as you want. So the limitation comes from the cost, not from rules. However, although it's not a formal rule, there are some issues with placing monsters. First and foremost, monsters act on their own instincts. They will generally attack humans on sight, but they don't follow detailed instructions. If they're intelligent enough, they might follow commands, but if their intelligence is low, they will establish their own territory and settle there. If they find the area uncomfortable, they may move, or in the worst case, leave the dungeon entirely. You've gotta be kidding me. Spending points to create something, only for it to walk off? That's a huge loss. Seems like unintelligent monsters should be treated more like wild animals that just happen to live in the dungeon. Locked doors separating floors are also used to prevent monsters from escaping. So it's not just about keeping intruders out, it's also about keeping monsters in. In that sense, doors are essential. Also, if you place traps, there's a risk that your own monsters might trigger them. It's not recommended to place monsters near traps. If you must, use monsters that won't trigger them. Like slimes over a pitfall, that kind of thing? Yes. However, experienced adventurers can often identify trap types just by observing the monsters present. I see. So predictable monster trap pairings create patterns that adventurers can learn. That's tricky. But the biggest challenge is that you have to provide monsters with food and water. I have to do that too? Karamu nodded at my question. I'd assumed they drew nutrients from the dungeon itself. There are some exceptions, but in most cases, yes. The number one reason monsters leave the dungeon is lack of food. Conversely, if you supply them with food, they'll stay. Do I also have to spend points to provide food? That sounds like a bottomless pit. No. Some monsters have higher reproductive rates. If you create them early and let them multiply, you won't need to spend more points. Right. Now that I think of it, there was a fertility stat. In general, weaker monsters reproduce quickly and multiply on their own. The standard method is to breed them first and use them as food. You can designate areas for grass or moss to grow, place rodent-type monsters there, and then raise monsters that feed on the rodents. Those, in turn, can be used to feed larger monsters. This is turning into a much bigger project than I thought. It's like I'm being asked to create an entire ecosystem. Are other dungeon masters really doing all this? Having to worry not just about defense, but also ecological balance? That seems way too much for me. That's exactly why I'm here to assist you. I see. Still, if all my effort goes into monster care, will I even be able to repel intruders? Right. What about skeletons or zombies? They don't need food, right? And if they don't move unless commanded, they won't trigger traps either. A dungeon full of undead, skeleton soldiers and such, sounds like a cliché, but maybe it's not a bad idea. Skeletons are inexpensive, don't tire, and even revive after being defeated. However, I wouldn't particularly recommend them. Why not? They seem to have only upsides. You'll see for yourself once you make one. In fact, let's create one now. Even if you don't use them in combat, having a few around can still be useful. I didn't really get what Karamu meant, but I tried creating a skeleton as a test. I left the stats untouched. A basic default skeleton. Cost, 10 points. For comparison, goblins and kobolds cost 15 to 20 points. Considering it doesn't sleep, doesn't tire, and revives on its own, This guy seems like a bargain. When I hit the confirm button, a white skeleton emerged from the same kind of light Karama had appeared from. It wasn't equipped with anything, so I gave it the iron sword I'd made earlier. "Alright, try swinging this." I handed it the sword. The skeleton, using its bony fingers that somehow managed to grip the handle despite having no tendons, swung the sword without drawing it from the scabbard. The scabbard flew off from the impact, clattered against the wall, and fell to the floor. Seriously, they weren't kidding about the lack of intelligence. It hadn't even thought to draw the blade first. Well, maybe I can just give it an unsheathed sword next time. Still, the motion itself wasn't bad. Slow, but probably better than me right now. "Alright, swing it some more." It performed a diagonal slash. Then a vertical one. Then back to diagonal, vertical, diagonal, vertical. The skeleton kept repeating the same pattern over and over. "Wait a minute. Don't tell me." "Yes. Skeletons only have those two attack patterns." "You've gotta be kidding." "Just two moves? Not even fast ones?" If I stayed calm and watched its rhythm, even I could probably beat it. Golems and puppet-type monsters have similar flaws. They don't tire, but their actions are extremely limited. You can teach them new patterns, but it takes time. You could also enhance their intelligence, but if you're going that far, then a regular monster would be more efficient. I finished Karama's sentence myself, feeling deflated. Also, skeletons have a lot of weaknesses. They're especially vulnerable to holy magic, blessed water, and even salt. And because their intelligence is so low, they'll fall for even the simplest traps, like tripping over a rope. Even if they see a trap, they can't avoid it. Once adventurers figure out how to deal with them, they're easily wiped out. Yikes. The more I learn, the worse they sound. I looked at the skeleton I'd just made. Since I hadn't told it to stop, it kept swinging its sword in endless repetition, like a ceiling fan. It's great that it was obedient, but it had zero adaptability. "You can stop now." "So, you said it'd be useful to have one, but how is this thing helpful?" Calling it this thing was rude, but I honestly couldn't see the use. Skeletons, golems, and puppet types can be possessed and controlled by the master. However, you can only control one at a time, and while doing so, you can't move and must focus entirely on operating it. It's restrictive, but having some in the dungeon can be handy in a pinch. That does sound handy. Maybe one per floor would be a good idea. Until you've settled on a clear direction, you can even teach it to do chores. Once it learns to help with your surroundings, it becomes surprisingly useful. That could really help out. But skeletons are out, and golems too. What other creatures are even available? 6. How to break through a dead end. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. How to break through a dead end. But if a skeleton or golem dungeon is no good, what else is there? After thinking it over for a while, I came up with an idea. Oh, right. How about ants? A dungeon like an ant nest. Wouldn't that be strong? Ants have higher reproductive capacity and are omnivores that eat almost anything. Their colonies are naturally maze-like, and they're notoriously aggressive toward intruders. You're right, ants are formidable. The largest ant-type species, the giant demon black ant, has soldier ants that are 3 meters long. Their exoskeleton is incredibly tough, and their jaws can crush even stone. In terms of strength, one of them could go toe-to-toe with an average adventurer. Whoa. That's a pretty powerful monster. The demon black queen ant costs 80,000 points, but as long as she's fed, she can lay a large number of eggs, which hatch into adults in about 20 days. Moreover, the worker ants forage for food on their own and even expand the nest without needing input from you. They practically take care of themselves. The more I heard, the more overpowered they sounded. After 2 months of building up a colony, wouldn't humanity be totally helpless? However, ant-type monsters come with 2 major issues. What kind? First, while the queen ant you create will not attack the master, the ants she gives birth to might. You're serious? Yes. To prevent this, you'd need to install a reinforced door to keep them out and lay ant-repelling traps near your quarters. So I wouldn't be able to leave? Honestly, that's not acceptable. There's a bigger problem, though. Ant-type monsters are designated as highly dangerous creatures in every country. Wait, What does that mean exactly? That didn't sound good. It means they're so dangerous that their mere existence is enough to threaten the fall of a nation. There are international treaties mandating their immediate extermination upon discovery. Vampires and liches, those that command the dead, are in the same category. Ants are on that list too? That's not good. Yes, and ants have a number of exploitable weaknesses. There are even adventurers who specialize in exterminating them. If they show up, then most likely they'd probably break through quickly. In general, monsters have weaknesses, and a dungeon relying on a single monster type is likely vulnerable. How do other dungeons operate, then? I really couldn't see how any of this could work well. I can't speak for all of them, but the standard structure is to populate the first floor with cheap, fast-breeding monsters like goblins or kobolds. These are preyed upon by carnivorous monsters, which in turn are eaten by larger monsters. So it's a hierarchy from weak to strong. In games, I'd always wondered why weak monsters showed up first. But maybe this setup actually made logical sense. Then, before the stairs leading to the lower floors, you place a door and have a large monster guard the key. That's the usual method. Ah, the so-called boss room. That seems to be the typical layout. It really is like a game dungeon. But can such an easily conquerable dungeon actually hold up? Let me ask, among these standard dungeons, how many have survived for at least a year without being overrun by adventurers? At this question, Kerama averted its eyes, or rather, its face. About 30%. I'd say. So, it's basically down to luck. By the way, I remember there's a town nearby. Do you have any information on it? I had just recalled there was a town close to the dungeon. Yes. I don't have knowledge of distant places, but I do have information about the surrounding geography and general knowledge of the area. As expected, this intelligence enhancement was likely intended for tutorial purposes. Still, it seemed to be restricted to avoid giving us too much useful knowledge or insight. About 4 kilometers east, there's a fortified city called Roderick. It has a population of around 70,000 and thrives as a trading hub. 70,000 people. That's a sizable city. If it's a trading hub, then it's probably well defended. Merchants would hire escorts, and capable adventurers would naturally gather there. Just 4 kilometers from here. Practically a stone's throw. It's like they're asking someone to come conquer the dungeon. Unless the dungeon is extremely powerful, it'll probably be overrun in no time. But if it's too strong, it'll only attract even more attention, drawing in powerful adventurers. Ah. No good. I'm screwed. I get it now. Running a dungeon in a place like this? Impossible. No matter how I approach it, survival's out of the question. The location is just too terrible. Is something the matter? Kerama looked at me with uneasy eyes as I sank into thought. It probably realized we're in a dead-end situation too. But as I pondered, a brilliant idea suddenly hit me, something I used to be completely hooked on. If I try to run this dungeon normally, it'll just get conquered right away. In that case, I'll have them conquer something else. Something else? By the way, you mentioned you have information about the town. Does that include product prices and market values? I do have knowledge of the kinds of goods that are traded there and their approximate prices. But what exactly are you planning? A casino? Even I could tell I was grinning like a scheming villain. 7. The Discovery of the Dungeon by Adventure Kite. 1. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Discovery of the Dungeon by Adventure Kite. 1. Kite, an adventurer from the fortress city of Roderick, sensed a strange disturbance in the flow of magical energy as he and his party made their way back to town. The first to notice were Melinda, the mage, and Seal, the half-elf. As they approached the source, even the others could begin to feel the magical presence. It seems a new dungeon has appeared, Kite murmured. The others nodded in agreement. None of them had expected a dungeon to appear so close to a road they traveled almost daily. It was an unlucky turn for the dungeon, but a stroke of luck for them. When they'd passed through the area 2 days prior, there had been no magical anomaly. Which meant the dungeon had appeared either yesterday or today. What an unlucky dungeon. And how fortunate for us, Kite said with a grin. The group chuckled. Being the first to discover a newly formed dungeon was an opportunity not to be missed. Even if the dungeon would one day host dangerous traps and powerful monsters, it would be weak and fragile for now. They had a good chance of clearing it easily. Kite and his companions were considered capable adventurers within Roderick. The guild and other adventurers respected them, but they had yet to gain fame outside the region. They took pride in their skills, but a lack of major accomplishments had kept them out of the spotlight. Clearing a dungeon, even a new and undeveloped one, would enhance their reputation. That alone made it worth attempting. Drawn by the magical signature, the party left the main road and headed into the nearby hills. Before long, they came across a large, gaping hole in the side of a cliff. No one had ever mentioned a cave in this area before, so it was safe to assume this was the dungeon entrance. I doubt something this new would have serious traps or monsters, but let's stay cautious. Aesel, scout ahead, Kite instructed. The rogue moved forward, checking carefully for traps as he went. You're being a bit too careful, aren't you? Gantz, the warrior, said with a snort, but Kite wasn't going to take chances. I'm not about to get tripped up in a brand new dungeon and ruin our reputation forever. Adventuring was full of embarrassing tales, of people making blunders that defied belief. Kite had no desire to become one of those cautionary legends. Following Aesel's lead, the group entered the tunnel, which sloped gently downward before leveling out. At the end of the path stood a single large red door. Above it, unfamiliar writing was etched into the stone. Casino? What's a casino? Kite read aloud. He looked to the others for answers, but no one recognized the term. Even Treff, the scholarly cleric, could only shake his head. As Kite reached for the door, it swung open on its own, revealing a dazzling light. What the hell is this place? Gantz exclaimed. They had stepped into another world. The ceiling glowed with light, a crimson carpet stretched across the floor, and cheerful music echoed through the space. There wasn't a single monster in sight. It felt more like a royal palace than a dungeon. The room was vast, with high ceilings and ample space. As far as the eye could see, there were no enemies. Large tables and chairs were scattered throughout, and in another area, rows of strange box-like machines stood side by side, each with a chair positioned in front of it. None of them had seen machines like these before. Stay alert. Something's not right, Kite warned. This was unlike any dungeon they'd ever heard of. There was a possibility it was an illusion cast by a monster, or something far more insidious. Seal, Melinda, and Treff cast detection spells, searching for traps, illusions, or hidden enemies. But no spell detected anything unusual. There were no signs of danger. No traps, no enemies? What kind of dungeon is this? Kite muttered. No one had an answer. The mysterious dungeon seemed to draw them in. Hey, there's a treasure chest over here, Gantz called out, pointing to a small box placed near the entrance. A treasure chest right at the front, definitely suspicious. A sign stood beside it. Grand opening sale? First-time visitors receive 10 coins for free? What the hell is this place? The whole thing reeked of a setup, but they couldn't ignore it. If it was a trap, it might at least reveal the dungeon's nature. Aesel, check it, Kite ordered. The rogue examined the chest carefully. No traps. No magical seals. Not even a lock. It was blatantly suspicious, but they had to open it. All right. Let's open it, Kite said. Bracing themselves, they lifted the lid. No trap was triggered. Inside was a single pouch filled with unfamiliar coins. No gold? Lame, Gantz scoffed, clearly disappointed, but Kite tucked the pouch away carefully. Whatever these coins were, they could be important for navigating the dungeon ahead. Where should we search? Treff asked, his gaze scanning the room. Kite answered without hesitation, eyes fixed straight ahead. That door, of course. Directly opposite the entrance stood another large set of double doors. In dungeons, large doors often indicated the path to the next floor. Their first priority should be finding a way further down. As they approached, they saw the twin doors were decorated, one marked with a sun, the other with a moon. No surprise it won't open just by pushing, Kite said. Even Gantz, their strongest, couldn't budge it. There wasn't even a keyhole, which meant Aesel couldn't pick it either. It's probably asking us to insert something here, Treff murmured. There were sun and moon-shaped indentations at about hand height. Clearly, they needed to insert something matching those shapes to open the door. Hey, there's another treasure chest here. Melinda called, pointing to a box placed beside the door. They checked it for traps and opened it carefully, only to find it empty. A dud? No, wait. There's writing inside, Dref noted, peering into the bottom of the chest. Indeed, text had been engraved at the base of the box. Insert coins and close the lid. Coins. Could it mean these? Kite said, pulling out one of the unfamiliar coins they'd received at the dungeon's entrance. Hey, there's a stone tablet over here too, Seal added, pointing toward a slab mounted on the wall nearby. Stone tablets in dungeons often offered hints or explanations. Kite read it immediately, but it didn't make much sense at first glance. Sun symbol, 100,000 coins. Moon symbol, 100,000 coins. High-grade healing potion, 1,000 coins. Low-grade healing potion, 10 coins. What is this? A price list. There were several other entries as well, but their meanings were unclear. It really does look like a price menu, Dref remarked. Now that he said it, it did resemble a catalogue of goods with corresponding coin values. So, this coin can be used here? If I put coins into the box, can I exchange them for these items? You're saying it dispenses items? Melinda asked skeptically. Only one way to find out. Kite dropped 10 coins into the chest and closed the lid. A soft mechanical sound followed. When he opened it again, a low-grade healing potion sat inside. Whoa. It actually worked. Seal used her appraisal skill and confirmed it was a genuine potion. So if we gather 200,000 coins and place them in this chest, we'll get the sun and moon symbols and can open the door? Kite guessed. But where the hell are we supposed to get that many coins? Gantz asked. Kite had no answer. Hey, over here, it says currency exchange on this box, Seal pointed out. A short distance away stood another machine-like box. Apparently, it allowed adventurers to convert local currency, specifically, Roderick's 1,000 Crocker silver coins, into dungeon coins. But the exchange rate was outrageous. 10 coins for 1 silver piece? That's robbery. Melinda snapped. She had a point. To open the main door, they need 20,000 silver coins, or 2 million Crocker. It was an absurd amount for an unexplored dungeon. Still, if a low-grade potion only costs 1,000 Crocker, it's not that expensive, Dref pointed out, examining the potion they'd just received. You're right. Those usually sell for 900 to 1,000 Crocker anyway, Kite said, nodding. Mid-grade potions, antidotes, and other items were listed too. Judging by Roderick's market rates, the exchange wasn't necessarily bad. In fact, the more expensive the item, the better the rate seemed. A high-grade potion worth over 100,000 Crocker was available for 1,000 coins, implying a good deal if they had the funds. Unfortunately, none of them had that kind of money on hand. Potions were the only reference point for now, but it seemed fair. If weapons, armor, or rare liquors were included later, the offerings might be worthwhile. Even so, trying to exchange enough to get the symbols isn't realistic, Kite said with a sigh. No way they'd earn that kind of coin from such a fresh dungeon. Let's keep searching. There might be coins hidden somewhere, he added. It was starting to seem like a treasure hunt-style dungeon. They began by investigating the tables, which appeared safe enough. Each was covered in a soft, short-fibered fabric with a pleasant texture. Some had strange labels: baccarat, poker, blackjack. The names meant nothing to them. Each table also had a closed for preparation sign on it, which made the whole setup feel like a joke. Hey, do you know what baccarat or poker is? Kite asked Melinda. Not a clue, she replied, shaking her head. Everything about this place was mysterious and slightly unsettling. They searched the tables thoroughly, but found no hidden coins. There was also what looked like a bar counter, though the shelves behind it were bare. Not even a speck of dust. Just another closed for preparation sign hanging there. Does anyone actually drink here? Finally, they turned to the row of strange boxes lined up along one wall. Each one stood nearly as tall as a person, with a single lever protruding from the side. In the center, 3 cylindrical reels displayed various symbols and images. Below the reels was a square slot, almost like a mouth. Letters across the top of the box read, "Slot machine." Kite tilted his head, completely unfamiliar with the term. 8. The Discovery of the Dungeon by Adventure. Kite, 2. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Discovery of the Dungeon by Adventure Kite. 2. What's a slot machine? Kaito asked, tilting his head. None of his companions knew, and the term made no sense. This place was full of incomprehensible words. Looks like something goes in here, Gans said, noticing a thin opening next to the lever. Beside it, the words 1 coin were written. So, we put one of these in here? Kaito wondered. He inserted one of the coins they received at the entrance. A strange sound echoed from the box, and the base of the lever lit up. There was an arrow pointing downward on the lever. Kite hesitantly pulled it. The cylinders in the center began to spin, and the various symbols started whirling rapidly. After a moment, the cylinders stopped spinning, 3 red fruit symbols lined up. Then a chime played, and 5 coins dropped from the square slot at the bottom. Huh? What just happened? What does this mean? Melinda tilted her head. Dref looked equally puzzled, but Kite felt like he was starting to understand. I get it now. This device is for increasing your coins. It must be some kind of game. You insert coins, match the symbols, and earn more coins. Collect 100,000, and the next door will open. But how long is it going to take to gather that many? Melinda's skeptical tone dampened the excitement. She had a point. Getting 5 coins per turn meant an absurd number of repetitions to reach 100,000. Still, these coins were given to us for free. Might as well play until we run out, Kite replied. It would be foolish to spend money exchanging more. But since these were free, there was no loss in trying. Once they were out of coins, they could just leave. They divided the coins among themselves and took seats at the machines. At first, they pulled the levers cautiously, but before long, they were all absorbed. Contrary to expectations, the coins didn't run out quickly. Even without fully grasping the mechanics, their coin count was slowly increasing. Apparently, the amount of payout depended on the symbols matched, and a payout chart was displayed at the top of each machine. There were several patterns, and the jackpot, 3 sevens, rewarded an astounding 1,000 coins. However, the triple sevens were nearly impossible to get. Only one appeared among the rotating symbols, and it rarely stopped on the line. The lowest reward, 3 red fruits, yielded only 5 coins, but it came up once every 4 or 5 spins. Occasionally, they'd hit 10 coin wins, so their stash slowly but steadily grew. Hey, shouldn't we head back? Melinda called out. Seal, sitting next to her, looked bored. It seemed this kind of entertainment didn't appeal to the women in the group. What, already? But I feel like a big win's just around the corner. Kite was reluctant to leave, caught up in the rhythm of the game. Do you even realize how long we've been here? Melinda shot back. With that prompt, he finally noticed how much time had passed. Half a day, gone in a blur. Right. It's gotten pretty late. All right, everyone, let's wrap it up. His teammates, thoroughly engrossed in their machines, voiced their protests. He sympathized, but they had clearly overshot their schedule. They'd intended to return to the city while it was still light, but the sun had long since set. Let's call it a day for today and head back to Roderick, Kaito announced. Today? You're coming back here? Melinda asked. She didn't seem the least bit interested in returning. It made sense. There were no monsters here, and for those not playing the slots, this place have nothing to offer. This is an important location. It needs investigation, Kaito said earnestly. Melinda's eyes showed she didn't buy it. I'm serious. Once we get back, I'll report to the guildmaster and request a proper investigation team. He did want to play more, admittedly, but he also genuinely believed this dungeon was special. His instincts told him this bizarre place was unlike any other. And besides, if someone tries to conquer this dungeon properly, it's going to take time. A time-consuming dungeon appearing this close to town? The guildmaster would definitely want to know about it, right? Kaito said. From a security standpoint, the authorities couldn't ignore such a matter. Reporting it to the guild would earn them recognition. And if a proper investigation team was organized, their party could be hired as guides and escorts. That would mean some extra income too. Fine, if you say so, grumbled Melinda, reluctantly agreeing. All right, Kaito announced, let's exchange our coins for items. I want to compare the quality, so try to each pick different things when you make your trades. They focused mainly on potions but also tried exchanging for some weapons and armor. Hey, mind if I try exchanging for one of these expensive-looking drinks? Gantz asked eagerly. He asked if he could trade for alcohol. The women in the group gave him disapproving looks. But since he earned the coins himself, no one objected in the end. When he tried it, he seemed very pleased. Apparently it was a kind of alcohol he'd never tasted before. The weapons and armor they got were also of decent quality, not top tier, but certainly not junk. Considering how long we were here, the profit's not great, Aesel remarked while appraising the items. He was right. Compared to the rewards from clearing an ordinary dungeon, the gains, cheap potions, low-grade weapons, and mid-priced alcohol, were definitely on the modest side. Just enough to count as pocket money, Kite pointed out, but there was no danger at all. In that sense, it's easy work. Dungeons usually involved life-or-death battles, which made the rewards worthwhile. This felt like playing a game, yet they earned a bit of coin. It was a sweet deal. Let's report to the guild and come back, declared Kite. Even if the guild didn't show much interest, Kite intended to return. He swore it to himself. Bottom floor, core room. At the dungeon's deepest point, Madaram and Karama observed the dungeon's activities. The dungeon core could display real-time visuals of the dungeon's interior, allowing them to see everything. Watching the adventurers leave, I nodded with satisfaction. Deepest level, core room. In the very depths of the dungeon, I sat with Karama, watching the adventurers through the core's display. The dungeon core could project any part of the dungeon in real time, allowing me to see everything that happened within its bounds. As I watched the adventurers make their way out, I gave a satisfied nod. Good. Looks like it went well. Seeing the first batch of adventurers leave in one piece, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had expected it to go smoothly, but to be honest, I'd been nervous the entire time. It went very well, Master. Still, I must say, I never imagined such a method existed. Karama, too, seemed surprised by the idea. A casino, of all things. To think you actually made something like that. It's completely unprecedented. My thought had been simple. If I didn't want this dungeon to be cleared, then I just had to make clearing it feel utterly pointless. Let me just confirm again. This doesn't break any of the dungeon rules, right? Building a dungeon meant complying with a whole stack of regulations. It'd be a disaster if I got told afterward that something I made was against the rules. I'd already spent a huge amount of points on this place. Yes, of course. If it had violated the rules, you wouldn't have been able to create it in the first place. The fact that you could means it was allowed. I believe the key is that you've made it possible to obtain the required symbols no matter what. That alone probably made all the difference. Hearing that, I finally understood something. Ah, I see. That's the angle. Normally, casinos are rigged in favor of the house. But here, I flipped the script. I made it so the adventurers would always win. I'd figured that if they lost too much, they'd get pissed off and maybe even start wrecking the place. I'd built the system with adventurers in mind, but only now did I realize it was also a major point in getting the dungeon approved. With this setup, anyone could clear it as long as they were willing to spend enough time. But we did go into the red this time. Master, are you alright with that? Yeah, well. It's our first run. Thanks to them hanging around for half a day, we'd earned a decent chunk of points. At their level, each adventurer generated about 10 points per hour. 6 people, several hours. That totaled around 360 points. I'd set the prize exchange rate to roughly 1 point per coin, and they'd taken out about 400 points worth of items. It wasn't great, but it wasn't disastrous either. Besides, I gave them those starter coins. Factoring that in, the loss is pretty reasonable. Next time they show up, we'll probably turn a profit. And if higher-level adventurers decide to make this their hangout spot, the points will flow even faster. And more importantly, this dungeon has minimal running costs. Normally, I'd have to spawn monsters, feed them, have them killed. And if strong adventurers show up and wipe everything out, I'd be drowning in losses. This setup might not be flashy, but it's stable. Alright, we don't have many points left, But let's activate the next facility. I was already looking ahead to their next visit. Time to make another investment. 9. The Casino Dungeon Investigation and Bath. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Casino Dungeon Investigation and Bath. A casino dungeon? What's that supposed to mean? No monsters, no traps? Can that even be called a dungeon? Upon returning to Roderick, the party immediately headed to the Adventurers Guild to report the existence of the bizarre dungeon they had discovered. However, Vice Guild Master Lady Pollet, who received the report, was not quick to believe it. I understand it's hard to believe, but it really is a dungeon, said Kite. Indeed, a dungeon without monsters or traps hardly seemed worthy of the name, but it existed nonetheless. It's definitely an unusual dungeon. All the more reason for the guild to investigate it. Very well. If you're that adamant, we'll send out an investigation team. Eventually, Lady Pollet was convinced. No doubt she remembered the party's past contributions to the guild and the sincerity of their leader. It surely had nothing to do with the fact that the absent guild master, who also happened to be the Kite's relative, wasn't around that day. Definitely not. The next day, they led the guild's investigation party back to the dungeon. Despite being off-duty, Lady Pollet joined the group. Her presence made things a bit tense. But if she could confirm the dungeon's unusual nature, the guildmaster, her superior, would likely listen. So this is the dungeon in question? Lady Pollet looked up at the newly formed entrance. The dungeon remained unchanged from the day before. Descending into the cave-like opening, they found no signs of monsters, just as expected. The treasure chest by the entrance was also in the same place. When opened, it contained 50 coins. Huh? Wasn't it 60 last time? Gans tilted his head. Wait, it says first-time visitors only, right? We've already been here once. The investigation party has 5 members. These must be for them. They regretted using up all their coins on the previous visit. Still, they could use the exchange machine. As the Kite glanced toward it, Melinda gave him a scolding glare. Don't tell me you're thinking of exchanging more. This is part of the investigation. Despite her protests, he exchanged only a single silver coin. Last time, less than 10 coins per person had been enough to come out ahead, so he figured it would pay off. There may not be any monsters, but that doesn't mean they aren't hiding somewhere. Let's investigate thoroughly. Lady Pollet gave instructions to the investigation team, mainly comprised of experts in detecting traps. Please handle the escort duties. Understood. Although Kite wanted to run straight to the slot machines, escorting the party was their primary mission this time. They first investigated the door leading deeper into the dungeon, the prize exchange station, and the coin exchange booth. So this is the prize counter. It even has drinks and ice cream. They hadn't tested these the day before, but apparently, citrus drinks could be purchased for 1 coin, and ice cream for 3. Still, it was hard to imagine someone coming into a dungeon just to eat sweets, but there seemed to be quite a few blank spaces. Indeed, many parts of the prize list were empty. Maybe they planned to add more later? Could be. Still, with the door requiring 200,000 coins to open, exchanging cash for coins isn't realistic. Lady Pollet said, sighing. Even if someone had the money, investing that much in a brand new dungeon didn't seem worthwhile. It would be a guaranteed loss. If you're going to spend 100,000 coins just to get a symbol, it'd be more profitable to exchange for other items. Most adventurers would surely come to the same conclusion. That would mean the dungeon couldn't be cleared by ordinary means. If someone is going to try clearing it, it'll have to be funded by the guild. Only the guild had the capacity to cover such a massive deficit. I see. Yes, this is indeed an issue the guild cannot overlook. With the usual methods ineffective, the guild would surely be held responsible if the dungeon became a problem in Roderick. Lady Pollet seemed to recognize the seriousness of the situation. For now, let's try exchanging some prizes. Lady Pollet used the coins she'd received to trade for a potion. As before, the machine delivered it properly. Next, we need to test the coin exchange machine. Kite used this as a reason to test the exchange. Just like with the prize machine, he inserted a silver coin into the box and closed it. A sound came from within, and when he opened it again, 10 coins were inside. With that, He was ready to play. He felt a bit of excitement but kept his expression stern under Melinda's watchful eyes. "Next, let's check out the slot machines. The best way to do that is to try one." Kite used this as justification to play a few rounds on the slots. He inserted a coin, pulled the lever, and demonstrated a few spins. One of them hit a payout, and his coin count increased, much to his satisfaction. But just as he was enjoying himself, Lady Paulette stopped him. "Understood. That's enough. Let's inspect the other areas." It was just getting fun, but he had no choice. He stepped down from the chair and resumed the investigation. He was about to suggest they had already covered everything, when he noticed a small difference between the slot machines. While most accepted 1 coin per spin, a few accepted 10 coins, and some even required 100. Apparently, the betting amounts varied. Higher stakes seemed to yield better payouts. Lady Paulette read the payout table printed on the machines. Sure enough, compared to the 1-coin machines, the high-stake ones offered great returns. If one had the coin supply, trying them out might be worthwhile, but the investment would be steep. Just as Kite was thinking everything else was the same, Treff and Aisel, who had been investigating another part of the dungeon, suddenly called out, "Come take a look at this." At the edge of the room was a corridor. It hadn't been there the day before, or at least, they didn't remember it. Has it been created sometime since then? "Did you find something?" "Yes, something strange." Peeking cautiously into the corridor, they discovered 4 doors. Each one was marked with a symbol, 2 blue humanoid icons and 2 red ones featuring a figure in a skirt. "Go ahead, take a look inside." "A trap?" "No, nothing like that." As Treff seemed genuinely surprised, they decided to open the nearest door with a blue humanoid mark, and were caught off guard. "This is a toilet." That was likely what it was. Diagrams on the walls explained how to use it. The reason for the hesitation was simple: it was far too clean to be a typical dungeon toilet. The walls and floor were covered in white tiles, immaculate and gleaming. The toilet bowl was pure white porcelain, spotless and pristine. Peeking into the door marked with the red icon, they saw a series of stalls, also toilets, but with no urinals. It seemed to be the women's restroom. A toilet separated by gender. In Roderick, shared toilets were the norm. They'd never seen one separated for men and women. "This is the cleanest toilet I've ever seen," Melinda said, clearly pleased. Indeed, it was almost unnaturally clean, too clean. Most dungeons didn't have toilets at all, forcing adventurers to relieve themselves in dark corners. A proper, sanitary facility was a welcome luxury. But is it really okay to use this place? Even the toilet itself was carved from smooth, polished white stone. A diagram on a stone slab showed that pulling a lever flushed water afterward. It was hard to imagine even nobles having such luxurious restrooms. Someone had even gone so far as to decorate the place with flowers. "This thing's so fancy it makes you clench up," Gantz muttered bluntly. The women frowned at his wording, but they couldn't completely disagree. It really was intimidatingly clean. "Come look at this too," Treff called out from another room. They hurried over, and were left speechless. "Is that a bath?" In a stone room, a recessed pool-like structure was filled with steaming water. Tentatively dipping a hand in, they found it was pleasantly warm. But the sheer volume of hot water was hard to believe. Not even royalty would have access to such a bath. They even included illustrated instructions on how to bathe. On the wall, drawings explained the proper steps: do not enter with clothes on, wash your body before soaking, do not use soap in the tub, and so on. "All right, I'm going in," Melinda announced suddenly. "Wait, you can't be serious. That's way too dangerous." It was still a dungeon, after all. No enemies had appeared yet, but there was no guarantee it wasn't a trap. And bathing would mean removing their armor and weapons. Too risky. "We're here to investigate whether or not it's dangerous. And to do that, we have to try it." To their surprise, Lady Paulette agreed. Seal and Aisel, standing nearby, also seemed to be on board. "Fine. I'll stand guard while you're bathing," Gantz offered with a smirk. Melinda turned a freezing glare on him and raised her staff. "Gantz, I'll roast you." Sparks crackled at the tip of her staff. She was dead serious. "We women will handle this part of the investigation. And besides, this is the ladies' side. isn't it? Sure enough, the door had a red humanoid icon, likely indicating a gender-segregated bath as well. Hey, it looks like we can use coins here too, Seal pointed out, gesturing to the wall. A small box was embedded in the wall. It seemed to dispense items in exchange for coins. Soap? The label indeed said soap. There were several types, priced at 1, 5, 10, and even 100 coins. Seal inserted a coin to test it and received a small bar of soap. It's tiny, but I guess it's enough for one Washington. Then I'll try the 5-coin one, Melinda said, inserting 5 coins. The soap that came out looked identical in size. Still tiny, but it smells amazing. This one is top quality. Let's see what 10 coins gets us, Lady Pollitt suggested. The 3 women agreed. Though it was extravagant, she didn't hesitate to put in 10 coins. This time, the soap that came out was slightly larger, maybe enough for 3 uses. Alongside it came a small bottle. Hair oil? When they opened the bottle, a rich, fragrant aroma wafted out. It smells like perfumed oil mixed with flowers. This is from the Southern Islands. I've smelled this before. It's the kind of luxury item presented to royalty, Lady Pollitt said in astonishment. Though it was commonly produced in southern regions, the cost of shipping it across the sea made it worth its weight in gold, she explained. No wonder they were so thrilled. It had only cost a single silver coin. The women were practically glowing with excitement. Still, the bottle only held enough oil for one use. Eager for more, all 3 of them spent another 10 coins each to get more soap and oil. Leaving the gleeful women behind, the rest of the party returned to the main hall. The bath investigation could be left to Melinda and the others, and with that, they could finally focus on the slot machines. The 10 and 100 coin slots were tempting, but their wallets didn't allow for that kind of luxury. For now, they settled for the single coin machines. As they enjoyed the slots for the first time in a day, they realized time had flown by without them even noticing. Hey, Kite, how's it going? Melinda called out cheerfully as she stepped out from the bath. She seemed to be in an excellent mood, and she had an ice cream in hand. Apparently, the bath had been a pleasant experience. Looking over toward the entrance of the bath, Kite noticed that benches, chairs, and tables had been set up nearby to allow people to relax. Lady Pollitt, Aisel, and the others were sitting there, enjoying drinks and sweets from the dungeon's prize list and chatting happily. Apparently, a lot of people do enjoy eating sweets inside a dungeon. Not bad, Kite replied. So far, he'd been winning and losing in turns, but overall, his coins were slowly increasing. He had around 25 coins on hand now. They'd been inside the dungeon for about 2 hours in perceived time. That meant he was earning around 8 coins per hour. Looks like things went well for you too, he said. Yeah. That soap was amazing. The hair oil smelled so good, and it made my hair super shiny. It was really high quality. Indeed, a pleasant scent lingered around her, and her hair had a lustrous sheen. Since Melinda was rarely in such a good mood, Kite decided to give her a compliment. Your hair looks really beautiful. He wasn't sure if complimenting her hair would mean much, but since it clearly made her happy, there was no harm in saying it. HMPH, I know, right? Melinda grinned with obvious delight. It was a side of her Kite had never seen before, and he found himself a little surprised by it. He reached for the slot machine lever again, and suddenly, 3 angel symbols lined up. The machine lit up in brilliant red and green, but something was odd. The angel icon hadn't appeared on the payout list. Still, the flashing lights suggested something special was happening. What is this? I don't know. The slot machine continued to flash brightly. Something felt different. He inserted another coin and pulled the lever again. The reels spun and landed on 3 red fruits. Yes. That's a win, right? 5 coins came out. But the lights kept flashing. Curious, he inserted more coins and played again. Another win. Wow, you're on fire. Melinda cheered. But it was strange. Kite had never hit wins this many times in a row before. He kept going. The wins continued to stack, 5 consecutive hits. The last one alone netted him 50 coins. His total shot up to around 100 coins. You did it. That was amazing. Melinda cheered, clinging to his arm with excitement. The rush of success was real, but it wasn't just the jackpot that thrilled him. Melinda, still flushed from her bath, was leaning against him, her body warm and fragrant from the soap and hair oil. The combination of sensory excitement and emotional high overwhelmed him. He wanted to feel that thrill again. He inserted another coin. "It's getting close to sundown," Dref remarked, checking the time. If they left now, they'd reach Roderick by nightfall. "Already?" Kite glanced at the time and realized he'd spent nearly half a day on the slot machines again. He never got the angel symbols to line up again, but in the end, he'd built up a stash of about 200 coins. Wondering what Melinda and the others were up to, he spotted them gathered around a table near the bath, still chatting away. So much for the investigation, though he couldn't really complain, having forgotten it himself. "Damn it, I lost this time," Gantz grumbled nearby. "Serves him right," Kite thought. "That's because you tried the 10-coin slot." While the slot machines were guaranteed to pay out over time, like dice, they could be heavily streaky. You might get lucky in a row, or not hit anything for a while. Without enough reserve coins, consistency was impossible. Gantz had only brought 30 coins, yet decided to go for the high-stakes machine. No surprise he'd lost everything. Feeling a little sorry for him, Kite handed over 10 coins. Gantz then shifted to playing the 1-coin slot in small doses and finished with about 25 coins. "All right, time to wrap it up." Lady Pollitt, now acting more like a chaperone than an investigator, clapped her hands and signaled the group. It was time to exchange coins for prizes. Everyone chose something according to their preferences. Most picked alcohol, justifying it as for research. As the one who had earned the most, Kite browsed the prize list, wondering what to get. One item priced at 200 coins caught his eye: hair oil. Given the cost, it was probably a large bottle. He hesitated. 200 coins, that was 20,000 kroner. That kind of money could buy a May meal, fine wine, top-grade weapons and armor, or flashy accessories. Or he could save it and exchange it for high-end recovery potions. Lots of options. Kite was about to stash the coins away when Melinda's smiling face popped into his mind. "All right, time to go." Once they were ready to depart, Kite approached Melinda, who was still with the other women, and handed her a bottle. "Here. This is for you." "Eh? Wow." Melinda blinked in surprise, accepting the bottle. "Is this hair oil? The one from earlier?" "Yeah. I didn't see anything else I wanted." "Are you serious? That one was expensive." She wasn't wrong. 20,000 kroner wasn't a small amount, especially for them. But judging by the bottle's size, it probably contained enough for 30 uses or more. "Thanks." Melinda smiled. Behind her, the other two women looked on with envy. That smile was reward enough, Kite told himself, and so, their second dungeon exploration came to a successful close. Deepest level, core room. From the core room, I watched the adventurers leave with a satisfied nod. Good, good. This time was a major success. The group from the previous day had returned with more people in tow. This time, I tested the slot machine's fever mode. The results were excellent. They were completely hooked. Some had even tried the 10-coin slots. A few lost everything, but thankfully, none of them got angry or violent. "We really made a good profit this time," Kerama said happily. At last, on the second visit, we were in the black. With the number of people involved, we had earned 600 mana points in total. That hair oil prize was a great move. In Roderick's market, hair oil was a luxury item and had been priced accordingly. But in truth, it only cost about 10 points to create. The prizes redeemed today had totaled about 300 points, meaning we had still made a significant profit. Stocking rare goods was definitely the right call. Yeah, glad we caught that. While rare in Roderick, these items were common where they were sourced. And because I could produce them directly through the core, shipping costs and regional scarcity didn't apply. I'd gambled that women would pay premium prices for cosmetics, and my hunch had been spot on. But I really didn't expect the bath to have such an effect. Of course, that was part of the plan. There was more to celebrate. The bath had clearly won over the female adventurers. Constructing it had consumed 90% of my remaining points, but it had worked. They'd spent their entire stay chatting after bathing, not claiming any more rewards. If they kept returning, they'd continued to contribute to long-term profits. But we're out of points now, so we can't build anything for a while. That was true, and it was a concern. But I wasn't worried. I know. But it's fine. Even now, no one's even trying to clear the dungeon. Clearly, adventurers didn't think it was worth using 200,000 coins to open the gate. That meant my safety was secure. Let's observe for about a month. If we earn enough points, we can roll out Phase 2. Deep in the dungeon's lowest level, I was already drawing up my next plan. 10. The Casino Dungeon, scheduled for renovation. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Casino Dungeon, scheduled for renovation. Yo, Kite. How's it going? Duncan, a regular adventurer, greeted Kite as he played at the slot machines. Not bad. It had been nearly a month since the discovery of this dungeon. At first, he had come almost daily, practically living inside the place. But over time, finances had become tight, and more importantly, he couldn't neglect his duties as an adventurer. Now his routine involved diving into a nearby dungeon early in the morning to earn a little money, then stopping by this one in the evening to unwind before returning to town. It was a system that worked well, even for Melinda and the others, who enjoyed being able to soak in the bath after a long day of work. The dungeon had started to become well known in the city. Lately, other adventurers had begun frequenting it as well. Sure gotten more crowded, huh? Duncan remarked, glancing around. He was clearly thinking the same thing. The number of people here was definitely increasing. That hair oil's popular in town now, Kite said. The high-quality soap and hair oil had become the talk of the city. Merchants were buying them at a premium and reselling at inflated prices. However, the hair oil seemed to be a rare item even for the dungeon itself. It was only restocked once a day and in limited quantities. Merchants had started hiring adventurers to snatch them up the moment they were replenished. As a result, ordinary townspeople could barely get their hands on it. Melinda, who owned a bottle, has become the envy of other female adventurers, and she was clearly loving the attention. Kite had no regrets about giving it to her. Still, the whole situation was starting to seem a bit too intense. Merchants were even getting into arguments over whose turn it was to buy the oil. The guildmaster had stepped in to mediate and was trying to implement a bidding system, but some merchants were resisting, making it a hassle. Anyway, Kite, what do you make of that? Duncan pointed to a new notice posted on the wall. It announced that renovations to the dungeon were planned in the near future. Looks like we're heading into a transition period, Kite said. Dungeons were often described as living things. Sometimes new corridors would appear, or rooms that hadn't existed before would suddenly manifest. Small changes were barely noticeable, but when the changes were large, the entire structure could shake, and the floor layout might even get rearranged. At worst, people could end up trapped inside, buried alive. Such periods of large-scale change were known as transition periods, and most people avoided entering dungeons during them. Usually, minor tremors served as a warning. But this dungeon was kind enough to announce its changes ahead of time. So, the real question is, how do you think it's going to be renovated? Duncan asked. My guess? That machine over there will finally go online. Kite glanced at the game machine that still bore a coming soon sign. No one knew what kind of game it was meant for, but the general consensus was that it would be activated during the renovation. That's the one. What kind of game do you think it'll be? The blackjack thing? Poker? Maybe baccarat or roulette? What do you think those are like? Duncan's eyes sparkled with anticipation. No way to know, Kite said flatly. The dungeon itself had been completely unexpected. Trying to guess the next feature it would add was practically impossible. I just hope they don't ruin it with weird changes, he added. He had come to like this dungeon. He still wanted to keep playing the slots. Everyone else seemed to be growing attached to the place, too. If the renovations were bizarre or disruptive, it would be a real problem. Still, Duncan said thoughtfully, part of me kinda wants to see what the transition looks like. He had a point. Kite was curious too. Seeing the exact moment the dungeon transformed would be fascinating. But at the same time, he worried that their presence might prevent the changes from happening. I'd like to see it too, he admitted. But better not risk it. If we mess up and the hair oil stops appearing, the guildmaster might actually kill us. At the mention of the guildmaster, Duncan grimaced. It's not official yet, Duncan said, but the Guildmaster is expected to announce a no-entry order during the transition period. Though the official notice was delayed, the Guild had already begun moving in that direction. The news would likely spread by tomorrow. The Guild sure is obsessed with this dungeon. There's nothing else like it. Just on uniqueness alone, it rivals even the 8 Great Dungeons. That's pushing it. The 8 Great Dungeons were the most legendary in the world, massive and nearly impossible to conquer. To defeat one would make a person a global hero. It was absurd to compare a freshly discovered dungeon to those giants. Still, there was no denying that this place was exceptional. And most importantly, Kite was the one who had found it. Kite was well aware that he was just a middling adventurer. He had decent skills and sharp instincts, but at best, he was second-rate. He'd never become a first-class warrior, much less a hero remembered in history. But if he stuck with this dungeon and kept pursuing it, maybe, just maybe, my name will go down in the records. He vowed to be the first to witness whatever changes were coming to this dungeon. Deepest level, monitor room. How's the monitor system, Kerema? The new monitor room was a freshly built chamber, with an entire wall covered in screens displaying views from across the dungeon. As plans to expand the dungeon progressed, it became clear that managing everything from just the core room was no longer feasible. Thus, I created the monitor room to specialize in observation and coordination. Previously, only the core itself could display visual feeds. But now, with the new system, multiple areas could be watched at once through toggleable monitors. It had been Kerema's idea, insisting it would become necessary sooner or later. But the installation consumed a significant amount of points, and the connections weren't working smoothly yet, so everything still depended on Kerema. Monitors 3 and 5 are acting up, Kerema reported. But they're fixable. I should have them running by dawn. But Master, you really should rest. Kerema kept pestering me to rest, but that just wasn't possible. I can't. We're way behind schedule. I'd originally intended to take things slowly. But to my surprise, the dungeon had become wildly popular. Adventurers now flocked in daily, and even city merchants had begun showing up. Now's the time to capitalize. We've got to push through, even if it's rough. It was a good problem to have. Still, the current setup was only a temporary patchwork born from a lack of points. It wasn't built to handle this many visitors. The slot machines were nearly always full, and more importantly, the prize exchange area was swamped with long lines. While the crowding helped track up points, rumors about inconvenience could quickly turn people away. Only a few more days until the grand reopening. We've got to finish by then. I probably wouldn't get any sleep until it was done. But this was the crucial moment. Sorry to drag you into this, Kerema. I need your help. Of course. Master, helping you is my purpose. You're a real lifesaver. Let's hang in there a bit longer. Yes. Kerema nodded with her tiny body. It was exhausting, but undeniably thrilling. 11. Casino Dungeon Renovation. 1. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Casino Dungeon Renovation. 1. A week later, before the sun had even risen, Kite and his companions departed from Broderick, heading straight for the casino dungeon. Their departure was unusually early, and their pace brisk, an aggressive march, to say the least. If Kite had had his way, he would have camped outside the dungeon overnight. However, his companions had firmly opposed the idea, and even the Guildmaster had warned that it could provoke the dungeon itself. Still, it seemed his uncle was equally interested in the changes occurring in the dungeon. He had designated Kite's group as the advance team and planned to send a full research party later in the day. That group was expected to arrive before noon. In the meantime, Kite's team was tasked with investigating whether the dungeon remained safe, but to him, it didn't matter. He had every intention of being the first one there regardless of the mission. Kite, you're going too fast. Ah. Sorry. Melinda voiced her complaint from behind, frustrated by the pace. Kite apologized but didn't slow down. He was determined to reach the dungeon as quickly as possible. It had been a long time since he'd felt this kind of excitement, perhaps not since his rookie days. Even if you rush, the dungeon isn't going anywhere. Nope, it's escaping. Annoyed by the complaining, Kite pointed forward. The casino dungeon was already in sight, but they couldn't afford to take their time. Look. It's getting away. After it. Double time. Hurry. He took off running. Behind him, there was only a sigh. No one followed. Resigned, he waited alone in front of the dungeon until the others finally caught up. Well? Has it changed? Yeah. Take a look. The dungeon's entrance had transformed. What had once been a mere cave opening was now a grand stone structure. A wide stretch of stone pavement led to massive columns and a roof made of carved stone, giving the whole entrance the appearance of a temple. A huge gate stood open beneath the arch. Wow! It's really expanded, Melinda said in awe. Previously, the entrance had been a standard 6 meters wide. Now it was nearly 4 times that. Without the stairs, even a carriage could pass through. To prevent congestion, the entrance was divided by a central staircase with arrows indicating up and down lanes. This is now a mid-tier dungeon, Dref murmured, gazing at the entrance. The size of a dungeon's entrance often served as a rough indicator of its scale. With a structure like this, it could now be classified as mid-tier, the kind of dungeon that would attract serious adventurers. Not even 2 months had passed since its discovery, yet its growth was extraordinary. Let's head in, Kite said. Before entering, everyone double-checked their gear. They ensured their armor was secured and weapons were in working order. The dungeon had been safe before, but there was no guarantee it still was. Caution was necessary. Once everything was ready, Aesel, the party's rogue, took point, scanning for traps as they advanced. As they followed the wide corridor, the familiar sight of the casino came into view. One large door stood open, an inviting gate. And standing on either side of that gate were 2 white figures. Human skeletons, skeleton monsters, monsters. Melinda's voice was barely above a gasp. Kite felt the same way. It had finally happened, monsters had appeared in this place. While monsters were standard fare in any dungeon, this one had felt like a paradise. Now that sense of peace was shattered. What do we do? Even the usually brash Gantz turned to Kite, eyes full of hesitation. Calm down. We're adventurers. We can't back down just because we saw monsters. The skeletons appeared unarmed. They would likely fall with a single hit. Be careful. There could be a trap. 2 unarmed skeletons standing alone was suspicious. Cautiously, the group approached. As they got closer, the skeletons turned their heads and noticed them. Kite prepared himself for combat, expecting them to charge. But instead, the skeletons slowly bowed their upper bodies in a courteous nod, then straightened up again. The group looked at each other in confusion. The skeletons hadn't attacked. If anything, it was as if they had greeted them. Did they just bow? Melinda's skeptical voice broke the silence. Kite had seen it too. The skeletons had dipped their heads slightly, as if greeting them. It was absurd. Monsters didn't bow. It had to be some kind of trick, maybe a preparation for an attack. But even so, there was no hint of hostility. They backed off cautiously. Kite kept a close eye on his team for any changes, but nothing seemed off. When he approached again, the skeleton gave the same slight bow. No weapons. No movement beyond that. They tried various approaches, but the behavior didn't change. The skeleton simply bowed when someone entered a certain range, and did nothing else, not even when touched. So, what do we do? Gantz asked, uncertainty in his voice as he glanced at Kite. Kite shared his doubt. Ignoring a monster wasn't ideal, but attacking a non-hostile one felt wrong. He weighed the options. Let's not provoke it, he said. Who knows what that could trigger? But stay alert. Just because it hasn't attacked doesn't mean it won't. They were the advanced team. Their job was to assess risk, not clear threats unnecessarily. If it needed to be dealt with, they could do it later. For now, he chose caution. With weapons ready and nerves taut, they passed by the bowing skeletons and entered the casino. Kite took one look around and let out a breath. The changes were drastic. It's really changed. The interior was almost unrecognizable. What used to be a modest room now stretched out 4 times its original size. Slot machines lined the space, too many to count. The door leading to the next floor was still at the far end, but now it looked a long way off. There are skeletons inside too, Melinda murmured. Kite's gaze swept the area. Several skeletons were positioned inside the casino, but they weren't behaving like enemies. Some stood motionless at the newly operational game tables, ones that had previously been marked as coming soon. No more under construction signs. So what, we play with the skeletons now? Gantz said, disbelief creeping into his tone. Kite narrowed his eyes. Across each table, a skeleton stood as if waiting for a player. They didn't seem armed, and none had moved from their post. It looked like they were there to host games. Monsters hosting games, it was absurd. And yet, that's what it looked like. Hey, look at that. Seal pointed to the other side of the room. Kite turned just in time to see a few skeletons walking around. He instinctively reached for his sword, but paused when he saw what they were holding. Brooms. One skeleton held a broom and dustpan, sweeping the floor. Another carried a long stick with cloth strips and dusted the tops of slot machines. A third moved slowly between chairs, wiping them down with a rag. Kite stared, stunned. There. Cleaning? The cleaning skeletons showed no sign of aggression. When someone got too close, they'd stop, bow slightly, back away, and then resume cleaning when the coast was clear. After several tests and careful observation, it became clear there was no immediate danger from them. Let's keep checking things out, Kite said, taking the lead again. The slot machines hadn't changed beyond the increased numbers. That was good. He thought, it meant something familiar remained. The prize counter and money changer have been updated, Dref said, pointing toward the far wall. Kite followed his gaze. Where once there had only been a pair of boxes for exchanging coins, now stood a large counter, reinforced with iron grills. Several skeletons stood behind the counter. Shelves behind them displayed a variety of colorful prizes. So now we're trading with skeletons too, huh? Kite muttered. Oddly enough, it made sense. The previous system had been slow and caused frustrating queues. Now, there were multiple counters, much more efficient. The skeletons being behind grills added a layer of safety, though Kite couldn't ignore the irony. This grill isn't to protect us, he said quietly. It's to protect the prizes from us. The skeletons weren't being kept out, they were keeping the adventurers in check. Monsters installing security against humans. It was all backwards. And somehow, that was the part that unsettled Kite most of all. 12. Casino Dungeon Renovation. 2. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Casino Dungeon Renovation. 2. We should check the baths too. Melinda, Seal, and Aisel, the women in the group, were visibly eager, practically flaring their nostrils with excitement. Kite agreed. He was curious as well. When they arrived, they found the bathing area had expanded significantly. The number of toilets had more than doubled, and the bath itself was now 4 times larger, with 5 additional tubs installed. Wow, it's beautiful. Melinda's eyes sparkled as she looked around. The interior had become more luxurious as well. This one's bubbling. What's going on with it? Gantz asked Dref, pointing to one of the tubs, which was not just filled with hot water but vigorously bubbling. It didn't seem dangerous, but it was certainly strange. I'm not sure, Dref replied, thoughtful. But maybe it's designed to have a massage effect. It did look like the bubbles could feel pleasant against one's legs and back. What's with this room? There's no bath in it, but it's crazy hot, Gantz muttered, opening a door toward the back of the bath area before recoiling from the heat. Steam billowed out in waves. Oh, I know this, Aisel said. It's a sauna. I saw one up north. You sit in there and sweat it all out. That's just heat torture. What kind of punishment is that? Afterwards, you jump into the cold bath next door. It feels great. Kite found that hard to believe, but maybe he'd give it a try later. I'm just happy it's bigger now, Melinda said. It was always too crowded to enjoy properly. Apparently, the men's side hadn't had as much trouble, but the women's side, where long soaks were common, had become congested. Look, they've got more soap now. Yes, Melinda exclaimed, spotting the little soap stall in the women's bath area. The soap and hair oil sold there had become rare due to limited supply, but with the expanded facilities, it seemed the stock had increased as well. Now everyone can get some, she said, clearly pleased. You've still got that bottle, right? Don't tell me you already used it up. Kite wasn't sure how much was used per bath, but maybe she'd run out. I've been using it sparingly, so I still have some. But everyone keeps asking about it, and that's its own kind of hassle. So people were hounding her, asking to buy it or begging for a sample. Kite thought. Wait a second. Are the merchants not buying out the women's side stock? On the men's side, merchants swarmed to snatch up all the supplies, leaving none for the adventurers. Not that any of them really cared. Not anymore, Melinda said. They came at first, but we chased them off. Now everything's distributed fairly through a proper lottery system. Kite blinked. He hadn't expected something like that to be happening in the women's bath. No one tried to hoard it for themselves? He asked. Melinda and the others exchanged glances. Well, one senior adventurer tried to, Melinda admitted. But that doesn't happen anymore. Her eyes flicked away as she said it. That was when something clicked for Kite. There had been one veteran female adventurer in Roderick, Melinda's senior, known for being a bit greedy. He hadn't seen her face around lately. There hadn't been any reports of her dying on a mission either. Kite stopped thinking. Some things were better left unknown. He shut off all speculation and turned away from the women's bath. After finishing their inspection of the bath area, they checked the rest area next to it. This space, too, has been expanded. There were more chairs, now upgraded to cushioned sofas. A vending device had even been installed to sell drinks and sweets using casino coins, which delighted the women. While the rest of them came to the dungeon mainly for the slots, Melinda and her group clearly enjoyed chatting and relaxing here after a soak. If they were happy, that was enough, he thought. There's another corridor over there, Kite said, noticing something on the wall opposite the bath area. There hadn't been a passage there before. When they moved in for a closer look, they found a hallway lined with doors. All of them were locked, each one decorated with symbols, flames, water, flowers, and a slot meant for inserting a matching emblem. Near the hallway entrance, a stone plaque bore an inscription. Overnight lodging, 1 night stay for 3 people, 50 coins. Insert coins to receive a key. A lodging house? Here, embedded into the wall beside the sign was a box resembling a coin slot from a slot machine. Insert coins and pull the lever, and a key would drop into the tray below, or so it seemed. For the sake of research, might as well try it, Kite said. He inserted some of their coins. A flower emblazoned emblem dropped into the tray. They found the matching door, slotted in the emblem, and the door opened. It's pretty cramped, Kite said, peering inside. The room for 3 was tight, little more than a bare space with triple bunk beds stacked against the wall. It didn't look particularly comfortable, but for sleeping purposes, it would do. Besides, with easy access to the baths and rest area, it wasn't a bad setup. Aisel, check for traps just in case. She did, but unsurprisingly, there weren't any. A lodging house inside a dungeon, huh? Kite muttered. Sure, we've camped inside dungeons before. But one that the dungeon itself provides. Kite couldn't help but let out a tired, baffled sigh. It was a bit much, even for this dungeon. It would actually be convenient if we could use this place as our base. Are you serious? Melinda shot Kite a disapproving look. You want to play slots that badly? Sure, staying overnight here would mean they could play well into the night. But that wasn't the only reason. No, it's not that. If we made this our base, we could save a lot of time. It was about an hour's walk from Roderick. Making round trips every day cost them 2 hours in total. If they could eliminate that, they could spend that time exploring the dungeon instead. We could use that extra time to explore deeper. Fine, let's say that's your reason, Melinda muttered, not entirely convinced, but she let it go for now. And yeah, it's cramped, but the price is great. At 5,000 kroner for 3 people, it was an absolute bargain. Prices had gone up in town lately, even the cheapest inns charged at least 3,000 per person. It's small, but it's clean, Melinda said, checking the bedsheets. The cloth was simple, but everything had been thoroughly cleaned. Honestly, it was more sanitary than some of the inns in town. And not to be rude, but this place might actually be safer. There were plenty of inns in Roderick, but the cheap ones weren't exactly secure. There were thief-infested dumps, places where luggage went missing all the time. A safe inn in a dungeon. That's ironic, but you might be right. Monsters were scary, sure, but nothing was scarier than humans. All right, Looks like we've checked most of it. They'd already taken a look at the restaurant and tavern, but those were still marked with preparing to open signs. The only thing left to check is that one. They turned toward the table where a skeleton was stationed. What do you think? Gantz asked. Even if it was dangerous, investigation was their job. They had no choice. I'll go in first. The rest of you wait here, Kite said. If it turned out to be a trap, having allies nearby might help. Either way, it was better than getting the whole party caught. Wait, I'm coming too, Melinda said, stepping forward. If it's a pit trap or something, we could get separated. If I'm there, I can help with magic. Kite hesitated briefly, but couldn't say no to the firm look in her eyes. Got it. I'll count on you to govern me. Since she was determined, there was only one way to respond. Kite stepped forward, weapon in hand, approaching the skeleton. As he reached the front of the table, the skeleton gave a polite bow. Welcome. This is a blackjack table. Both Kite and Melinda blinked in shock, and so did the others behind them. A talking skeleton? Treff, the cleric, looked startled. None of them had ever seen a skeleton speak before. You can play blackjack at this table. Would you like to try? The skeleton ignored their surprise and repeated the offer. Yeah. I'll give it a go. Kite leaned his sword against the table and sat in the chair. Melinda stood behind him, ready to act if anything happened. I don't mind playing, but what kind of game is it? I don't know the rules. In that case, let's play a few rounds without stakes, the skeleton offered smoothly. It seemed willing to walk him through the rules first. Blackjack is a game played with these cards, called trump cards. The skeleton showed a bundle of paper cards. It looked like a type of card game. Slightly different from what Kite had seen in Roderick, but similar enough to follow. In blackjack, the dealer, that's me, competes against the player. The skeleton dealer explained the rules. They were simpler than expected. After a few sample rounds, Kite had picked up the terminology and the mechanics. So we're trying to get to 21? Got it. Let's try a real round with coins. Kite placed some actual coins on the table to play for real. He was dealt 4 cards, then another was added. One set had 2 face cards. I'll bet 5 coins on this hand. He placed 5 coins in front of the cards. The dealer's face-up card was a 5. When the face-down card was revealed, it was a face card, bringing the dealer's total to 15. Since the rules required the dealer to draw another card if under 17, the skeleton drew again, and got another face card. That brought it over 21, a bust. Kite had won. Congratulations, the skeleton said without a hint of sarcasm, clapping politely. The dry clack of bone echoed in the air, but somehow, it felt nice. The skeleton opened a drawer and pushed forward a small stack of coins. Kite's winnings. Thanks. I'd like to keep playing, but I want to check out the other games too. I'll stop here for now. We look forward to your next visit, the skeleton said, bowing politely again. Kite realized he'd just had a completely normal conversation with a skeleton, and only now did it start to feel weird. How was it? Gantz asked as Kite returned. Just as you saw. Not a trace of danger. The skeleton had shown no hostile intent at all. There are monsters now, but no threat. Of course, a full investigation would be needed before declaring the place completely safe. But so far, everything pointed to just that. And Kite doubted anything would change that, even with a deeper look. The real problem is, how are we supposed to explain this to the guildmaster? That thought weighed on him more than anything else. 13. Dealing with the casino dungeon. Kite's proposal. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Dealing with the casino dungeon. Kite's proposal. Afternoon report. A talking skeleton that doesn't attack people? And now there's even an inn? Are you mocking me? After completing their survey and reuniting with the main investigation team, Kite and his companions returned to Roderick and reported everything as it was to the guildmaster. The response they received shook the entire guild hall. We're not mocking you, Uncle Gilran, Kite tried to placate him. But he was promptly shot a glare. Sorry, I mean, Guildmaster. Gilran was a man who drew a strict line between public and private life. Calling him uncle in the guild was enough to earn a scolding. Honestly. As if it wasn't bad enough already, with all the youngsters hanging around the dungeon and interfering with operations. Kite couldn't exactly deny the accusation, he was one of the culprits. Still, it was true that some adventurers were practically living there. What's even worse is that hair oil being given out as a prize. The whole town's talking about it. It went for 20 gold coins in the last auction. That's insane. I should have sold mine. Kite couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. But no matter how good the quality, it can't be worth that much, can it? From a neutral standpoint, the product might be worth 2 or 3 gold coins at most. Still a fortune, but far below the price it had reached. The merchants are fighting over it. If this keeps up, someone's going to lose their head. The bathhouse is all over town gossip too. At this rate, we might start seeing regular townspeople coming to the dungeon. If only the monsters were attacking. That'd be an excuse to shut the place down. The guildmaster ground his teeth in frustration. Even if the dungeon was currently safe, that could change at any moment. It was still a dungeon, after all. But there were no laws stopping people from entering one. We can't just leave this alone. If something goes wrong, we'll be the ones held responsible. Incidents in dungeons were typically the adventurer's own responsibility. But as the guildmaster said, public outrage would almost certainly fall on them if something happened. The recent addition of an only complicated things. At this rate, someone might decide to treat it like a vacation spot, but a dungeon is still a dungeon. Monsters are starting to appear, even if they don't attack. We can't just ignore this. Hearing that, Kite stiffened. Don't tell me. Are you planning to clear it? He couldn't keep the accusation out of his voice, and instantly regretted it. If I could, I would. The guildmaster slammed his hand on the table. Just yesterday, some noble's daughter, or maybe a cousin of the lord's cousin's friend, whatever, showed up demanding that hair oil. So she asked you directly? Gilbert nodded, his expression bitter. It must have been quite the scene. Kite almost wished he'd seen it. We can't shut it down anymore. If we destroy the dungeon now, we'll lose all public support. And he was right. Kite and Melinda would definitely resent him for it. They couldn't stop him, but they wouldn't forget. Still, this was no longer someone else's problem. If they wanted to keep enjoying the place, they'd have to come up with a solution. What if we stationed a guild security team there? Kite voiced the idea that had just come to him. A security team? Yeah. Recruit adventurers to keep watch, fully armed, and monitor the dungeon to make sure no monsters get out of control. That way, it's safer, right? And who's going to pay for that? You lot willing to work for free? The guildmaster shot him a skeptical look. Ah, no. I'd rather not. But what if the guild monopolized the hair oil supply? Monopolized? Yes. We already have people rotating through, right? We can arrange for the guild to control the stock through a schedule. Then we sell it at a markup. The profit covers the security team's expenses. What had started as a spur-of-the-moment idea now seemed increasingly viable to Kite as he explained it aloud. And the merchants won't raise a fuss over that? They probably will. But it's a dungeon, after all. The kingdom's laws don't apply there, right? The rule is, what happens in the dungeon isn't a crime. The law considered dungeon incidents a matter of personal responsibility. That's why even assassins and robbers use dungeons as lawless zones. Adventurers attacking other adventurers wasn't unheard of. Of course, murder is out of the question. But chasing someone out? That's probably fair. I mean, this dungeon is under our jurisdiction. Isn't it the merchants who are overstepping? Gilbert pursed his lips, a sign he was thinking. He was weighing the risks and gains in his head, the backlash from monopolization, the proper markup for resale, and how much smoothing over with the nobility would be necessary. After a long pause, the guildmaster finally nodded. 14. The ever-growing money problem. The solution? A crane game. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The ever-growing money problem. The solution? A crane game. Deepest floor. Monitor room. I found myself nodding repeatedly as I watched the skeletal dealer handling the blackjack table from the newly constructed monitor room. The card game setup was clearly a hit, most of the tables were full, and people were having a great time. The number of customers was more than satisfactory, and the points were pouring in fast. At this rate, I figured I'd recoup my investment in no time. I'm glad it's working out. Especially the way the skeleton handles the cards, very smooth, said Kerima, praising the scene from beside me. You flatter me. Though, I did put a lot of effort into its card handling skills, I replied, full of pride. The skeletons had been given intelligence, but due to budget constraints, I couldn't afford to make them that smart. So I had no choice but to personally teach them everything, from how to bow to how to handle the cards. It had been a nightmare. I barely got any sleep. But the end result was worth it. To be honest, it felt like raising a child. Sorry I dumped everything else on you, Kerima, I said. While I had been busy with the skeletons, I'd left nearly all of the casino renovations to him. All I did was give vague instructions, like make the entrance wider or add an in, and left the rest to Kerima. Even this monitor room was its doing. Poor him probably didn't get a break either. I was a little surprised the adventurers accepted the skeletons, I admitted. I thought they'd destroy them on sight. After all, we're talking about adventurers and the monsters here. I fully expected them to smash the skeletons without a second thought. But while the first group of investigators had been startled at first, they eventually accepted the idea. Although in the end, they did destroy them all, Kerima reminded me. Right. After thoroughly inspecting everything, the adventurers ended their investigation by destroying every skeleton, just to see what might happen. I mean, that's fair. If I were in their shoes, I'd have done the same, I said with a shrug. Fortunately, our skeletons are designed to respawn after some time, so I'd already anticipated this kind of treatment. And once they saw the respawned skeletons didn't attack people, they stopped breaking them, I added. They'd even waited for them to regenerate, then carefully observed to confirm that they weren't hostile. Adventurers could be surprisingly meticulous when they wanted to be. Still, they did put up a barrier, Kerima noted. Yeah, but that's fine. On their way out, the adventurers had placed a magical barrier around the dealer skeletons to keep them from wandering. Even if they believed they weren't dangerous, they weren't about to let their guard down in front of monsters. But the dealer skeletons were never meant to move anyway. And they left the cleaning skeletons alone, I said. Those little janitor skeletons that wandered around tidying up weren't put in a barrier. I guess even adventurers appreciate a clean place. Maybe they felt a little sympathy toward us, Kerima mused. Maybe, I said. If they're watching to see how we act, we just have to make sure we stay in sync. If I may ask, are you sure this was the right approach? Kerima tilted its entire upper body sideways, trying to mimic a head tilt despite not having a neck. As my assistant dungeon master, it was probably still conflicted about the idea of telling monsters not to attack humans. But that's one of the core principles of this dungeon, we don't harm people. Kerima was just going to have to get used to that. Something else that surprised me was the adventurers stationing guards full-time. Didn't see that coming. Apparently they'd organized a security team and started keeping someone on duty at all times. Do you think they're just being cautious of the monsters? Maybe. Or maybe they want to put this place under their control. Recently, I'd noticed non-adventurers showing up here and there. I guess even humans have their own turf wars. Either way, it works out for me. They're not getting in the way, I said. They were effectively depositing points into the system for free. And since they were trusted with security, they were no pushovers either. The points they dropped were even more valuable than average. Should I build them a proper guard station or something? That might be a good idea. If we make it comfortable, other adventurers might get jealous and want the job themselves. I'd have to draw up some blueprints and build a new room. If it's just one extra room, I wouldn't even need to shut down the casino. I could just construct the room and then erase a wall to connect it. Now that you mention it, the inn's gotten pretty popular too. I originally built it so people could stay up late and enjoy the slots, but it looked like it was being used like an actual inn now. There's a mid-sized dungeon about an hour from here, Kerima said. It looks like people are using this place as a base to head there. It made sense. It was closer than heading back to town. In that case, maybe we should add preserved food and travel rations to the prize list. With the level of tech in this world, I could probably manage canned or jarred goods. Sugar wasn't too expensive either. Things like nut-filled cookies or syrup-preserved fruits might sell well with the crowd using this place as a base. Weapons and armor don't get exchanged much. Maybe we should just remove them from the prize pool. Looking at the exchange rates for prizes, I could see that weapons and armor were barely being claimed. Hardly anyone bothered with them. I mean, I don't want to make anything too powerful. If someone grabbed a weapon and tried it out on the nearest monster, or worse, tried to take on the whole dungeon with it, it'd be a huge headache. So I avoided putting anything strong on display. Naturally, that meant the options were all cheap, low-quality stuff. No wonder nobody wanted them. They could probably find better gear in town without even trying. Soap and hair oil are way more popular, though. In fact, they became too popular. Merchants started showing up just for the hair oil and soap. Popularity is great and all, but if it turns into nothing more than a wholesale supplier for merchants, I get nothing out of it. So I quickly made them limited quantity items. Lately, it seems the adventurers have started monopolizing the hair oil prizes. Looks like they've found themselves a new revenue stream. Guess I should start focusing more on products and services only I can provide, like the soap. Anyone can make weapons and armor. But if I can mass-produce things that only come from here, that's a stronger draw. Any ideas? Yes, I was thinking of making cosmetics, things like lotions, foundations, even nail polish. People might go crazy for them. Only problem is, I know absolutely nothing about cosmetics. It'll take time to put together a proper product lineup. For the guys, alcohol and tobacco should be good enough. Honestly, if it were up to me, I'd go with adult entertainment. But let's be real, how many guys are lining up to sleep with monsters? Probably none. And I really don't want to scare off the female clientele I've managed to attract. It's already a gambling den. I don't need to push the decadence any further. This dungeon is supposed to be a fun, upbeat casino. That's our motto. Still, I appreciate the popularity, but this is turning into a real problem. I looked toward a corner of the dungeon where silver coins were piling up in ridiculous amounts, and still growing. They were all silver coins exchanged to use the casino's internal currency. I had purposely set up the system to prevent people from cashing their casino coins back into silver. I didn't want the place to turn into a full-blown gambling joint where people came just to chase money. And I still think that was the right call. But now a different issue was cropping up. Is stockpiling money really that big of a problem? Kerama tilted its head, or rather, its whole body, confused. Money only has value when it circulates. When one person hoards too much of it, it becomes a problem. That's Economics 101. Easy to forget sometimes, but I did major in econ back in college. But don't merchants and nobles hoard tons of wealth too? Sure. But at least they plan to use it. Merchants save for the next shipment. Nobles spend on banquets and garden parties. To commoners it might seem wasteful, but all that extravagant spending keeps tailors, chefs, and artists in business. Sometimes even inventors get funding that leads to new breakthroughs. Their excess has a purpose. If rich people don't spend their money, it's meaningless. But this money I've been collecting? I've got no plans to use it. At first, watching the mountain of silver grow made me feel rich and powerful. But once I realized it had no actual use, it just felt like a pile of scrap metal. If I keep hoarding like this, eventually there'll be a silver shortage in the human world. It's a minor issue for now, but if this continues, we could trigger a regional currency shortage, and that could disrupt the economy. Better to fix it before that happens. I'd just given him a crash course in economic theory, but Kerama clearly didn't follow. Well, that's fair. Kerama is my right-hand man when it comes to dungeon design and the monster mechanics. But understanding human world economics? That's asking a bit much. It's not like dungeon masters usually stockpile human currency. Is it really such a problem if we end up hoarding all the coins and pulling them out of circulation? Yeah. Okay, say we make coins for the casino, right? What happens if one guy hoards a ton of them and refuses to trade or spend them? I decided to explain it step by step. Kerama was my one and only trusted partner. It deserved to understand. Wouldn't we just make more? What if we couldn't? What if coins suddenly became rare? Then their value would go up. Right? Kerama had caught on. Exactly. Fewer coins means their relative value increases. And once that happens, People won't want to trade them for prizes anymore. Our coins were originally pegged to the currency used in Roderick, 100 kroker for 1 coin. But that exchange rate would start to wobble. I could move to a floating rate, but that'd confuse the hell out of customers. I really didn't want the value of kroker itself to start fluctuating. If the prizes aren't worth the coins anymore, no one will trade them in. And then everyone loses. That's the scary part of economics. Once the flow stops, even tiny disruptions snowball into massive problems, and eventually, no one can stop it. Back in my world, entire empires collapsed because of shortages or outflows of gold and silver, even with unbeatable armies behind them. I must have half slept through those lectures, but somehow it all stuck. A healthy economy needs money to circulate. And look, I'm not trying to become filthy rich or wreck this country's economy. Growth depends on flow. Sitting on a pile of treasure does no one any good. So, we're going to release the silver back into the market? But how? Yeah, that's the tricky part. A normal dungeon wouldn't have this problem. Just dump the coins in treasure chests, and adventurers would loot them automatically. But this was a casino. I couldn't just hand out money for free. Not to mention, that wouldn't generate any points. But if I let people exchange coins back into silver, the entire vibe of the place would shift. I didn't want that kind of crowd showing up. Maybe I'll set up a crane game. At my suggestion, Karama tilted his entire body again, completely baffled. 15, Glorious Hand, hand the money. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Glorious Hand, hand the money. When Kite stopped by the casino after another day of adventuring, he found the place even busier than before. More people every single day, Melinda muttered in disbelief. It had been a month since the casino had been revamped, and its visitor count was still climbing with no signs of slowing down. Hey, Kite. Duncan, stationed near the entrance, called out with a casual wave. Duncan, you're looking more and more like a proper guard these days. The guildmaster had accepted Kite's proposal and posted a security team to the dungeon. Some of the casino's more valuable prizes, like the hair oil, were now under guild control, and it seemed to be paying off well. Duncan had managed to secure a spot on that guard team and was now regular presence here. How's business? Making any money? Not bad. You? No major problems so far. It's a pretty easy gig. Man, I'm jealous. You get off work and head straight into the casino, and your post is right next to it, too. Kite glanced at the newly built security post near the entrance. For whatever reason, the dungeon had built it for them, complete with decent furnishings. The skeletons even took care of the cleaning. No wonder the adventurers on guard duty were happy to stay. Spending the night again? Duncan gestured toward the temporary lodgings set up within the casino. Nah, I stayed over yesterday. Heading back to Roderick tonight. Kite had been making use of the lodging facilities, but staying every night wasn't realistic. He needed to return to Roderick periodically. Kite, we're heading to the bath. Melinda and the other women waved as they left for the bath. Women really love their baths, huh? Watching them go with cheerful steps, Duncan shook his head like he couldn't understand. Do they? I love it myself. Nothing beats a good soak. And the sauna's great, too. Saunas are torture, plain and simple. Clearly, Duncan wasn't a fan. You heading for the slots again tonight? There was a slight teasing edge to Duncan's voice. Yeah. It's the most fun, isn't it? You just don't get it. Blackjack is where it's at. Duncan had gotten hooked on the recently introduced blackjack tables. There are other games like blackjack, sure. But the slot machines? You can only play those here. Why not enjoy what's unique? I'll admit that, but slots don't have any real strategy. A real man plays blackjack. Neither of them was backing down. This debate had been ongoing among the adventurers for some time, each side convinced that their favorite game was the best. Kite remained firmly in the slot camp. It was supreme. Some people just didn't understand, he thought. Still, Kite added, changing the subject before it turned into an actual argument, the hottest game right now is that one. He pointed to a newly added attraction. Hand the money, huh? Yeah, that one's on another level, Duncan agreed. Together, they looked toward the massive transparent box stationed in one corner of the casino. It was the latest showpiece, Hand the money. Inside the box were piles of coins, mostly silver, but with a few gold pieces scattered in. At the top of the box was a clay hand, a low-level monster stuck to the ceiling. Using a clay hand like that, this dungeon master's got a screw loose, Duncan said. Clay hands were dirt-based monsters shaped like human hands. Normally, they lurked in muddy water or disguised themselves as dirt, then grabbed adventurers' legs to trip them up. A nasty creature that quite literally pulled people down. Everyone hated them, but here, it had become a golden hand of fortune. Hand the money was simple to play. There were 5 control buttons on a console in front of the box. Using those, the player moved the clay hand across the ceiling. Once they decided on a position, they pressed the confirm button, and the clay hand would lower itself, grab whatever coins it could, and drop them into the prize chute. Whatever came out was the player's to keep. You try it today? Yeah, I gave it a shot before heading out. The appeal of physically winning coins made the game a huge hit almost instantly. However, each person was only allowed 1 play per day, and it cost 10 silver coins, 10,000 kroner. It wasn't cheap, but on average a play yielded about 10 coins. Unless someone had terrible luck, they weren't likely to lose out. And if someone grabbed a gold coin, that alone could make up for all their previous losses. Did the black one come up? If it had, you think I'd still be working here? Fair enough. Kite let out a small sigh, just as a loud, passionate voice erupted. Let's go. This is it. An adventurer roared and lunged for the hand the money console. It looked like someone was about to play. Kite found himself pulling a fist, drawn into the moment. Despite himself, the man moved the buttons, the clay hand above shifting with each press. When he hit confirm, the brown hand came down, scooped up some coins, and then opened over the chute. A shower of silver rained down. He got about 12 coins. Not bad, but the man looked disappointed, and Kite and Duncan let out a quiet breath of relief. Good, no jackpot. Yeah. We're safe. They weren't cheering for failure, exactly, but they were definitely glad it wasn't a big hit. Inside the box, there were other coins as well, red, green, yellow. Clearly not standard currency. Those were bonus coins. Catching one earned the player an extra play, or sometimes even 2. Among them, there was one single black coin. That one was the jackpot. The ultimate prize. Catching it meant the player would win every single coin in the box. It sounded like a lie, but it was true. And since the coins from each play got added directly back into the box, it never really ran out of silver. The game made no profit, but it was excellent for drawing in crowds. Lately, people from Roderick had started coming just for hand the money. Today, too, the casino was packed. But with more people came more problems. Hey! What the hell is this? A shout of anger rang out from within the casino. 16. Kite's talent. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Kite's talent. A loud shout echoed through the hall. Kite looked over to see an adventurer yelling at the dealer skeleton at a blackjack table. Looks like it's your turn, security squad. Give me a break. Again? Duncan muttered as he scratched his cheek. Kite understood. It was gambling. People got heated. Losing stung. Even he felt the urge to punch the slot machine sometimes, especially when he was sure the jackpot was coming and it didn't. But the worst were the ones who picked fights with the dealer skeletons. This is a scam. Give me back my money, the adventurer kept shouting, but it was laughable. The dealer skeleton was just bones, didn't even wear clothes. There was nowhere to hide a card, much less cheat. More importantly, this casino didn't run cons. It wasn't even here to make money. Just like hand the money, the payout system was downright bizarre. Normally, in gambling, the house always wins. But here, it seemed like the system was rigged for the players to win. It had to be intentional, Kite thought. Huge wins were rare, but if someone played steadily and didn't do anything reckless, they'd always end up a little ahead. The 10-coin and 100-coin slots were a bit different, maybe, but the house edge was almost non-existent if you played smart. So seeing an adventurer lose it like that just looked pathetic. The dealer skeleton wasn't backing down either. Once the coins were collected, they vanished, no refunds. It didn't run or hide either, it simply stood there silently, because it couldn't do anything else. The barrier Kite had placed made sure of that. Eventually, the usual happened. The adventurer drew his weapon and brought it crashing down on the skeleton's head. It couldn't dodge. The skull cracked and scattered across the table. TCH, damn monster. The man seemed satisfied with his outburst and grinned, but Kite felt a surge of anger rise inside him. Duncan, standing beside him, frowned as well. Go stop him. You're the security. Can't do that. You know the rules. We're not allowed to reprimand adventurers for killing monsters. Duncan was right. Kite had no counter-argument. They had done the same themselves during the initial inspection. Every skeleton had been destroyed just to test safety. Still, it bothered him. Seeing the dealer reduced to a shattered pile of bones just irritated him. The skeleton wasn't dead, of course. It was undead, and given time, it would reassemble itself. No harm done, really. But it still pissed him off. I'll talk to him later. Get his name and report it to the guildmaster. Let him handle the rest. The guildmaster treated this dungeon like a fragile but lucrative venture. He was carefully squeezing profits from it without provoking it, and without letting his guard down. There was always the chance, however small, that something like this could push the dungeon into open hostility. What a fool. The guild already put out a warning not to cause trouble here. The guildmaster was known for being ruthless. He looked out for the collective benefit of the guild but didn't hesitate to cut down those who acted against it. That man's future was unlikely to be bright. Forget the idiot. Kite, are you entering next month's event? Of course. Next month would bring the big hand the money event. Apparently, during the tournament, the clay hand would be twice the normal size. It was limited to the first 500 participants, and people were already planning to line up the day before. Melinda and the others weren't too excited about it, but after some begging, they'd agreed to save a spot in line for Kite. You're joining too? What about your guard shift? Taking the day off, obviously. If I'm lucky and pull the black coin, I can quit this job for good. I'm telling my uncle. Too bad. The guildmaster's entering too. Seriously? Yeah. He won't show up in person, but he's sending someone as a proxy. If they win, he gets half the haul. Even coming from his own uncle, Kite thought that was pretty outrageous. Well, I'm off. The slot machines were calling. After a brief goodbye to Duncan, he headed to his usual one-coin slot machine. He wasn't aiming for a jackpot, just hoping to walk away with a modest win. How's it going? Winning? A short while later, Melinda showed up, steam still rising from her skin after the bath. Yeah, not bad. Looks like I'll be able to get some canned goods. Really? That's great. Melinda lit up with a smile. Lately, the casino's prize catalog had undergone a transformation. Cheap weapons and armor were gone, replaced with portable food and canned goods. The portable rations were a mixture of dried fruits and nuts, baked together with flour. They had a crisp texture and were surprisingly tasty. With their variety of flavors, it was hard to go back to the bland dried meat and rock-hard bread that adventurers usually had to eat. And the canned food, they were something else entirely. Somehow, beans, meat, and fish had been preserved inside thin metal containers. At first, Kite had been skeptical about whether they were even edible. But they turned out to be quite good. There was no metallic taste, and though the food was a bit oily, that it was probably just a side effect of the preservation process. Get me peaches if they have any. I want the peach one. She was asking for a can of peaches. Lately, the women in Kite's group, especially Melinda, had become obsessed with canned fruit. The fruit, preserved in sugar syrup, was delicious. Each can cost 30 coins, quite expensive, not something one could casually afford, but when Kite had extra winnings from the slot machines, Kite prioritized trading them in. After all, when he brought back a can, Melinda would be in a good mood the entire next day. That said, the product was extremely popular in town as well, reportedly trading for 4,000 kroner. Merchants has been trying to buy up the entire supply, but the restock times were unpredictable, so getting one came down to luck. Still, those cans are amazing. You can eat fruit even in winter. Melinda smiled dreamily as if tasting one in her mouth again. It was certainly revolutionary, easy to carry, packed with out-of-season fruit. Apparently, they kept for up to 2 years if the label was to be believed. That made them excellent as preserved rations. I heard merchants are trying to replicate them. Can't we get someone to make them too? That'll be hard. Making that much thin metal isn't easy. The cans were made from thin iron sheets. It was possible to flatten metal by hand, but producing it in volume was another matter. I doubt we can copy the exact can, but maybe something similar. The important part is sealing the contents in syrup, brine, or oil, right? Maybe we can use glass jars instead. Heavier and breakable, but a functional alternative. I'll suggest it to the merchants next time I get the chance. The real challenge would be the lid. Regular stoppers or caps wouldn't cut it if they wanted an airtight seal. Some ingenuity would be required. While turning the slot machine, lost in thought, Kite noticed Melinda grinning at him. What? Nothing. I just figured maybe that's where your real talent lies. What do you mean? The guildmaster was praising you the other day. My uncle? Hard to believe. All he ever did was yell at Kite. He said you're a second-rate swordsman, but you've got a good head on your shoulders. Kite couldn't help but grimace at Melinda's words. That's not a compliment. I think it is. Being sharp and perceptive is important for an adventurer. And it's not a job you can do forever anyway. That was true. Adventuring isn't a lifelong career. Anyone could make money with it, but they were gambling with their lives. Most adventurers looked for another path once they'd saved enough. Your idea about the security squad turned out well, didn't it? She gestured toward the security posts set up near the entrance. The guildmaster's pleased, the merchants are satisfied, and the adventurers on guard duty say it's an easy job. Thanks to your suggestion, a lot of people are better off. Maybe you're better suited to this kind of work. Her words gave Kite pause. I'm not saying you have to decide right away. But give it some thought, okay? I'll help however I can. With that, Melinda turned and walked off. Kite watched her go, then got up from his seat. Suddenly, he wasn't in the mood to play slots anymore. I am a second-rate adventurer. My talent isn't anything special. The security squad idea had just come to him on a whim, but seeing it take shape had genuinely made him happy. There was something deeply fulfilling about seeing an idea of his come to life. Another path, he had never considered anything except climbing higher as an adventurer. But it wasn't something he could keep doing forever. Eventually, he'd have to find a different way. Surrounded by the flashing lights and endless noise of the casino, Kite found himself thinking seriously about his own future. Deepest level, monitor room. All right. The crane game worked out great. What had started as a throwaway idea turned into a massive success. The Hand the Money event had also been a big hit. They'd allowed people to start lining up the day before, and 500 had shown up, spending an entire day inside the dungeon. Thanks to that, the point influx had been phenomenal. Still, that game doesn't allow us to manipulate the outcomes. That could be a problem. Kerama, ever the cautious one, offered a reminder. We had some control over the slots. Not to rig them unfairly, but actually to help the players. Normally we left things alone, but if someone had lost badly, we'd tweak the odds to let them win back a few coins. We didn't do it often, but it was possible. With the crane game, though, we couldn't tamper with the mechanics, so the jackpot came around the 300th player. No worries. That was within expectations. We had opened the prize box right in front of the player, letting nearly 3,000 coins spill out. The adventurer had stood there, stunned and overjoyed, half buried in silver coins while everyone else looked on, seething with envy. Of course, we had anticipated a mid-run jackpot, so we'd kept 2,000 coins in reserve and replenished the box for the remaining players. That event would definitely be repeated in the future. Things are going well. The inn is always full. Maybe it's time we added a few more rooms. In the beginning, adventurers feared being attacked by monsters, installing their own locks and traps on the doors. Some even used magic. But now, they'd settled for simple measures like noise traps or shards of glass that would crunch underfoot. As expected from seasoned adventurers, they never fully let down their guard. Not that it mattered to me. What about the skeletons? How many got destroyed today? None so far. The number has been going down steadily. It wasn't uncommon for sore losers to take it out on the skeleton dealers. That much was inevitable when money was involved. But recently, adventurers started discouraging that kind of behavior. The security squad even escorted unruly guests out when they acted up. It was a big help. Everything's going smoothly. No issues at all. The monsters weren't scaring people. The new games were well received. The lodging was profitable. It was fair to say the dungeon had been accepted. All right then. Time to launch the next phase. I made up his mind. Master, you really intend to go through with it? We'd discussed it countless times, but Karama still looked reluctant. Still against it? Not at all. But it's going to be unprecedented. Becoming a pioneer, that's an honor. To serve a master like you is the greatest fortune of my life. Karama's sarcasm earned a laugh. So, who will you send? I already know. The messengers will be those who first entered this dungeon and continue to visit it regularly. On the monitor screen, a young man was visible, playing at the slot machine. 17. A letter from the dungeon master. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. A letter from the dungeon master. The dungeon submitted a request to the guild. The roar was so loud it felt like the entire guild hall trembled. It came, of course, from none other than Grin, the guild master of the Adventurers Guild, and Kite's uncle. Kite had seen it coming. He calmly waited for the shout to die down, having already clamped his hands over his ears. Once silence returned, he spoke up. Looks that way. I was staying at the dungeon inn last night when a skeleton approached me. Said it had a request for the guild, then handed me this. He pulled a pure white envelope from his coat, completely unadorned, yet immaculate. Not a single stain or wrinkle marked its surface. Though not of noble make, it had a strangely refined quality. Who, or what, could even craft something like that? They paid me a gold coin just to deliver the letter, Kite added, offering it forward. Hard to say no, for more reasons than one. It might just be the kind of message that would go down in history. You're telling me this is a request from the dungeon master? Gurren asked sharply, narrowing his eyes. Most likely, Kite replied with a nod. I haven't met them, but I hear there's someone guarding the dungeon core. You should know more about that than I do, uncle. Haven't you ever spoken to one? I've met them, Gurren said with a grunt, crossing his arms. They're intelligent. They can talk. But they almost never do. Why not? Kite asked, tilting his head. Because by the time you reach them, their castle's already fallen, their minions are wiped out, and they're the last ones standing. You think they're in the mood for small talk? Fair point. And even if they were, it's a risk. Say the wrong thing, and you fall into some trap. In the end, they're still enemies. Best to take them out without the chatter. Kite didn't argue. He couldn't imagine anyone enjoying a conversation with someone they were about to kill. In any case, a request is a request. Here, sign the receipt, Kite said, sliding the paper across the desk. Money had changed hands. Even if it was from a dungeon, they had to handle this properly. Once the signature was complete, Kite handed over the letter, but stayed put. Part of the request had been to wait for a reply, no matter what it looked like. Gurren broke the seal and pulled out 2 neatly folded sheets of paper. The message was short and easy to read. As his eyes scanned the page, the color in his face darkened further. Looks like the dungeon's recruiting. Kite crossed his arms. So it seems. That first sheet is a staffing request. They want help finding people to hire. You read it? Gurren growled, shooting him a dangerous glare. Kite raised both hands. No. No. Of course not. One of the basics of being an adventurer was knowing when not to peek. I did ask what it was about before accepting the job, he explained quickly. That's not against protocol. And they told me, on the condition I wouldn't repeat it. Since it wasn't dangerous, I agreed. The letters asking for live-in workers from the guild, he added. Gurren slammed the paper down on his desk. What in the hell are they trying to pull? Kite offered a casual shrug. Well, judging by the conditions, I'd say they're planning to open a restaurant. Or a bar. That much is obvious. Gurren barked, glaring at him like it was his fault. The request was surprisingly straightforward, no restrictions on age or gender. Preference for strong individuals, ideally retired adventurers. They needed people with culinary experience who could live on site and had worked in food service for at least 3 years. They were also looking for bartenders, waiters, and other restaurant staff. Kite glanced at the mental image that formed, those long vacant buildings in the dungeon that had always said coming soon. It looked like the signs were finally coming down. Even if that dungeon isn't dangerous, nobody wants to eat food cooked by monsters. Human chefs and bartenders are definitely a must. Kite folded his arms, watching his uncle's scowl deepen. The dungeon might be trustworthy enough, but the idea of monsters preparing food still stirred an involuntary unease. You never knew what might be in the stew. At least if the chefs were humans sent from the guild, it would offer some peace of mind. Gurren slammed his hand on the desk. The real issue is, why the hell does a dungeon even have a restaurant or bar in the first place? Kite gave a helpless shrug. You're asking the wrong guy, uncle. Clearly, Gurren was still not ready to accept the absurdity. That said, benefits and workplace conditions are pretty solid. Honestly, it doesn't sound like a bad job. According to the letter, the pay for live-in chefs was 300,000 kroku a month, a very generous salary. 1 day off every 7, with a raise system based on years of service. It was tempting enough that Kite half-joked to himself he might quit being an adventurer and apply. Still, he added, if anything goes wrong with a customer, the dungeon doesn't take responsibility. All incidents are considered the employee's own problem. That part made sense too. They weren't just looking for chefs who could cook. They wanted people who could handle themselves. That's probably why the dungeon had approached the guild instead of hiring random civilians. Gurren rubbed his temples. Gambling, baths, lodgings. Now restaurants. What the hell are they turning that place into? Maybe, Kite said lightly, they just want us to feel at home. His uncle shot him a warning glare, the kind that said, say one more thing and I'll throttle you. But it's not all bad news, right? Kite added, trying to steer the mood. He shifted his eyes to the second page of the letter. The second document contained a business proposal. The dungeon wanted to sell 100 sets of their signature hair oil and soap to the guild, for 2 million kroku. That many sets could seriously help us out, Kite noted, tapping the paper. Both products were rare, luxury items. The guild currently monopolized them. But even so, supplies were short, and they couldn't meet demand. Securing another 100 sets would allow them to resell to nobles and merchants, expanding the guild's influence, and its profits. I know that already, Gurren growled through gritted teeth. He understood full well that sending skilled adventurers was worth the risk. What frustrated him wasn't the danger, it was being forced to play along with the dungeon's game. The moment they accepted the deal, the guild would be giving ground. But if we turned them down, Kite continued calmly, they might take this offer to the merchants instead. The guild had been approached first, yes. But business was business. The dungeon wasn't obligated to work only with the guild. There were plenty of merchants unhappy with the current monopoly. If they got wind of this offer, things could turn messy fast. I know that too. Gurren snapped, nearly spitting the words. Then, after a moment of brooding silence, he muttered to himself, maybe I'll ask him. Without another word, Gurren sat down, scribbled a reply, and handed the letter to Kite. 18. The Guild's Chef. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Guild's Chef. Damn it, that bastard. Grin. Grumbling under his breath, Garara stomped down the road leading out of Rodruk. He had once been a well-known adventurer. Born a dwarf with a sturdy frame, Garara was practically made for dungeon diving. Though his youth had been full of hardship, he'd challenged and cleared several high-difficulty dungeons, even forming a party with Grin, who was now the guild master. But those days were long gone. After injuring his knee and retiring from adventuring, he had taken up the culinary path, a passion from his younger years. Unfortunately, his fiery personality as a former adventurer got the better of him, and after pummeling a noble who dared insult his food, he'd lost his restaurant and fallen into debt. Gurren had stepped in to help, but it seemed that kindness had its limits, and now he wants me to work in a dungeon? What a bloody joke. The man had covered his debts and even found him a new job, but once he listened to the details, he realized it was a restaurant inside a dungeon. A restaurant in a dungeon. The very idea is an insult. TCH. The world's gone mad. He'd heard rumors about the strange new dungeon, gambling, baths, and other nonsense. Apparently, adventurers were flocking to it. It wasn't just the dungeon that was strange, the fact that no one was bothering to conquer it made Garara question this entire generation. Back in his day, the mere mention of a dungeon would send adventurers rushing to claim glory and treasure from the depths. And now I'm being sent to work in a place like that? Guess this is what they call the changing times. It was pitiful, really. Still, Garara owed Gurren for covering his debts. Until he repaid what he owed, he had no choice but to work. Once he'd paid it all back, though, he planned to quit immediately. Scowling, he picked up the pace, and soon, the infamous dungeon came into view. So this is the casino dungeon, huh? Heard it's new, but the entrance sure looks impressive. It hadn't even been 6 months since its discovery, yet its entrance was already at the scale of a mid-sized dungeon. For someone like Garara, who had seen the legendary 8 Great Dungeons, this was nothing. But the moment he stepped inside, his expectations were utterly shattered. What in there? This is supposed to be a dungeon? A red carpet lined the floor. Gleaming lights sparkled from the ceiling. Light-hearted music filled the air. Adventurers sat at bizarre machines, exclaiming over cards or coin payouts. In what looked like a salon, female adventurers chatted cheerfully, steam rising gently around them. Is this really a dungeon? It felt more like a leisure resort, but the scattered skeletons roaming the halls reminded him where he was. One dealt cards in front of a group of players. Another stood behind iron bars, trading goods with adventurers. Stunned by the surreal scene, Garara nearly forgot why he was here. He remembered that the guild had assigned a security post within the dungeon. He glanced around and spotted a guard station near the entrance. There, by the wall, stood an adventurer gripping a spear, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Garara nodded slightly in approval. It seemed capable warriors still existed. A few others around the hall also maintained vigilant stances. Talent, it seemed, had not disappeared. I'm Garara. Gurren should have sent word ahead, he said as he approached the guard. Ah, the one we were told about. Please wait a moment, the guard replied politely. He approached a skeleton who was polishing chairs with a rag. Garara blinked. The skeletons. Cleaning? Before he could react further, the skeleton paused, set down its tools, and walked over. On instinct, Garara's hand moved to the axe at his waist. He didn't draw it, but he wasn't about to lower his guard. We've been expecting you, Master Garara, said the skeleton smoothly. Garara's eyes narrowed. So you can talk. It wasn't shocking. Skeletons, golems, and other puppet-type monsters were often extensions of the dungeon master's will. They could be controlled to speak or act. Garara had encountered a few who'd spoken before, though they were typically limited to scripted phrases. That's right. Gurren told me you're looking to hire me, he said flatly. Exactly, the skeleton replied with a courteous nod. I've got one question. Are you the dungeon master? Indeed, I am. Though to be precise, I'm being remotely operated. This isn't my true form. The answer came easily, with no attempt to dodge. Though he'd heard puppet monsters talk before, this was the first time Garara felt like he was having a proper conversation with a dungeon master's direct voice. I see. Even as he nodded, a sinking feeling twisted in his gut. To think he'd fall so far as to be hired by a dungeon, by a monster, no less. It was almost enough to make him cry. I'd like to give you a tour of your workplace. Please follow me, the skeleton offered, already turning. With a grimace, Garara followed, keeping his hand near his axe. The skeleton might look harmless, but who knew what traps a dungeon master could lay? If danger came, he intended to split the thing in two without hesitation. His fingers curled around the familiar grip of his axe, just in case. 19. The Dungeon's Restaurant. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Dungeon's Restaurant. This will be your restaurant. Led by the skeleton, Garara arrived at a sectioned-off area of the dungeon. It was enclosed by a low fence, with several tables and chairs arranged inside. There wasn't a soul in sight, and every table bore a closed for preparation sign. You'll be working here as a live-in chef, the skeleton explained in a calm, measured tone. Your working hours will be 4 hours in the morning and 4 in the evening, 8 hours total. I believe you've already been informed about the pay and benefits. Are there any issues? Garara gave a curt nod, grumbling, no issues. Whether or not he wanted to work here was another matter entirely. Then let me show you the kitchen, the skeleton said, motioning for him to follow. Garara's jaw clenched. The guildmaster is crazy for sending me to a place like this, and these damn monsters are just as mad, trying to hire adventurers. A kitchen inside a dungeon? It has to be a cesspool. He fully expected moldy walls, greasy floors, and rats scuttling across counters. The very idea made his hand tighten on the handle of his axe. But when they arrived, what greeted him defied all expectations. What the hell? This is the kitchen? His voice came out low and stunned. The floor and walls gleamed with polished white stone tiles, not a speck of dirt in sight. In the center of the room stood a massive preparation table, metallic and spotless, shining like it had just been forged. Hanging from the walls and ceiling were copper pots and pans, their red gold surfaces gleaming under the light. All the cooking tools were neatly arranged and looked like they were waiting to be picked up by a master chef. A series of magic-powered stoves lined the far wall. A giant oven, easily twice the size of any he'd seen before, stood embedded like a monument. Garara had never seen a kitchen outfitted to this level, not in any guild, noble manor, or royal court. This is the pantry, the skeleton continued, gesturing toward the back. Still in a daze, Garara followed. There, a heavy metallic door loomed before them. The skeleton heaved it open with some effort, and a wave of cold air swept over Garara's face. This is a cold chamber? He muttered, eyes widening. He'd heard of magical devices that could produce ice and chill food, but only high-ranking nobles or top-tier merchants could afford such luxuries. The equipment was impressive, but the contents were even more shocking. Piled inside were crates of fresh vegetables, plump fruits, eggs, cheeses, cured hams, and sausages. Everything looked crisp, full of color, and farm fresh. They stepped further into the back, where another door led to a deeper chamber. The temperature dropped even lower. A freezer, Garara muttered, blinking at the sight of fish and meats sealed in ice, waiting to be thawed and cooked. Is there anything we're missing in terms of facilities? Asked the skeleton, its tone sincere and unbothered. Garara looked around, taking in the state-of-the-art kitchen and high-quality ingredients. No complaints, he said at last, gruff but impressed. But let me ask this. You are my employer, right? What kind of restaurant are you planning to run here? I want to hear it straight. He had the tools. He had the ingredients. But none of that mattered if his boss turned out to be a control freak, or worse, an idiot. He wasn't about to take orders on menu items or pricing from some overreaching monster. For dinner, you'll have relative freedom. Just serve delicious meals at fair prices. That's our only condition. The skeleton's answer was so reasonable, it caught Garara off guard. HMPH. Of course. I don't serve slop, I don't price gouge, and I don't do bargain bin cooking. The ingredients here were top tier, likely too good for the average adventurer or commoner. Even at reasonable prices, they'd still be considered luxury meals. But Garara had no intention of competing on price. He would win with flavor. You mentioned freedom with dinner. What about breakfast? You've got something planned? Yes, the skeleton replied without hesitation. We're thinking of doing a buffet. A what now? Garara narrowed his eyes. What the hell's a buffet? It's a self-serve dining style, the skeleton explained. Several varieties of bread, simple meat dishes, eggs, salads, and juices will be placed on a large table. Guests can take what they like and eat as much as they want. Garara's face twisted in disbelief. Wait, you're telling me it's all you can eat? For adventurers? They'll clear the table in 5 minutes. Adventurers were known for being bottomless pits. Give them a free-for-all, and they'd eat the place out of business before noon. But meeting your customers' needs is part of good service, isn't it? The skeleton replied gently. Garara paused. He remembered his early days, young, broke, hungry. Always hungry. He and his friends had struggled just to afford stale bread. Many died because they lacked the strength to fight, all because they couldn't eat properly. The thought made his chest tighten. I get that. But I already told you, I don't do cheap food. That's why we've set the breakfast price at 1 silver coin per person. 1,000 kroner. for a buffet that felt steep, at least for breakfast. However, the skeleton added smoothly, for guests staying in our accommodations, breakfast will be complimentary. I see. So that's your angle. Garara had heard rumors the dungeon even had its own inn. If guests got free meals with their stay, plenty of adventurers would jump at the offer. This whole dungeon was clearly built to draw people in. Even Gurren had said as much. The location was close to town, had decent roads, and offered baths and entertainment right inside. Now it's adding good food and free meals for guests. Garara still didn't know what the dungeon master's ultimate plan was, but from a culinary standpoint, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Top-tier equipment, top-tier ingredients, a constant stream of potential customers. Anyone could succeed here. Which meant the real test was his skill. All right, he said, giving a firm nod. I'll take the job. 20. Casino Hotel opening soon. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Casino Hotel opening soon. Casino Hotel opening soon, now accepting reservations. That announcement was posted not long after Kite had exchanged several letters with the dungeon master. The chef arranged by the guild master, Garara, had shown strong enthusiasm for the job. Just 3 days after his arrival, he opened the restaurant. Despite the lack of a full waitstaff, he held a grand opening event where food was served free of charge. The event was a smashing success. The restaurant officially began operating the following day, and 3 days later, the bar also opened. Many adventurers had been eager for a place to grab a meal before or after a delve, and others who struck it rich at the casino were looking for somewhere to drink and unwind. As a result, both venues quickly became popular. Kite himself was among the patrons. It was during one of his visits that he spotted the new notice posted on the wall. Hotel? A casino hotel? What's this dungeon trying to pull this time? Melinda muttered, staring at the sign with open disbelief. A hotel means lodging, right? 1 month for a single room is 90,000? A 3-person suite is 250,000. That's ridiculous, she exclaimed, her voice rising in shock. Kite winced. Yeah, that's definitely on the pricey side. Split 3 ways, it came out to just over 80,000 per person. In Roderick, the going rate for monthly rent was closer to 50,000. For a casino that had built its brand on affordability, the sudden shift in pricing was surprising. Looks like they're offering tours of the rooms, Kite noted, squinting at the fine print on the poster. Doesn't mean we have to rent one, but might as well check it out, he added, already turning toward the hotel wing. His companions didn't object. They followed him down the corridor toward the new lodging area, which had clearly been expanded. A new hallway had been added since their last visit. Near the entrance to the hotel stood a skeleton, who gave a deep, courteous bow as they approached. Welcome, Master Kite. We are honored by your visit, the skeleton said, its voice smoother and more articulate than the average animated bones. Kite blinked, mildly surprised. So the dungeon master is controlling this one directly. The difference in mannerisms makes it obvious. Still, it feels oddly nice to be remembered. Kite, are you smiling right now? Melinda spoke, catching the flicker of satisfaction on his face. He pretended not to hear her. So, Kite said, brushing off her remark, I hear the new hotel's open for viewing. Can we take a look? Of course. Right this way, the skeleton replied with a polite gesture. It led them into one of the 3-person suites. Wow, not bad at all, Melinda said, whistling as she stepped inside. The suite was laid out with a shared common room and 3 private bedrooms. The main room had a large table, chairs, shelves, and even a dedicated rack for armor and weapons. The interior was immaculate. Rugs covered the floors, tasteful paintings hung on the walls, and there was a refined atmosphere to the place that stood in stark contrast to the bare-bones lodgings adventurers were used to. There was even a small bathroom with a toilet and shower, not to mention a magic-powered stove and a water tap. It wasn't luxurious, but it was plenty comfortable. Kite could easily imagine them gathering around the table for meetings or casual tea. Each bedroom was modest but tidy, with a bed, side table, shelf, and wardrobe. For the price, the furnishings were of surprisingly high quality. The service, too, was impressive. Cleaning staff would replace the linens if guests simply hung a tag on the door. To get this level of accommodation in Roderick, you'd easily pay 80,000, Kite murmured. I guess the price matches the value. Still out of our range, though. Huh? What's this? Melinda asked, noticing 3 pieces of paper laid neatly on the desk. Kite picked one up and read aloud. Breakfast voucher. Guests staying in this room will receive complimentary breakfast, the skeleton explained smoothly. Please bring this voucher with you to the restaurant in the morning. Breakfast included, huh? Kite mused. Though that's not really unusual. Most inns serve leftovers with bread in the morning. However, the skeleton added, our hotel offers a buffet-style breakfast. We hope you'll give it a try. Buffet. Melinda repeated, blinking. What's that? Kite's ears perked up. A new word from the dungeon always means something exciting. It's a self-serve dining method, the skeleton explained. We lay out a variety of dishes on a large table, and guests are free to take what they like in the amounts they desire. Hold on. So it's all you can eat? Kite asked, narrowing his eyes. Gantz and Treff immediately began murmuring with interest. Yes, that's correct, the skeleton answered without hesitation. What kind of food are we talking about? Melinda pressed, understandably wary. A buffet full of lousy dishes wouldn't be worth the price. The breakfast spread includes several kinds of bread, egg dishes, meats, salad, fruit, soup, and juice, the skeleton replied. At the mention of meat, the men leaned forward. When fruit came up, the women brightened with interest. As for the taste, I cannot describe it in words, the skeleton added, but I can assure you it matches the same quality served at our restaurant. Kite let out a low whistle. The restaurant was already famous for its high standards. Though pricey, its meals used top-grade ingredients normally out of reach for ordinary adventurers. Even Roderick's food connoisseurs had started making regular trips. Can non-guests pay for breakfast? Melinda asked, her interest clearly piqued. Absolutely. For non-hotel patrons, the buffet is available for a flat rate of 1,000 kroner. 1,000 kroner per meal was steep, but if you booked a room, it came included. Kite exchanged looks with the others. So, what do we think? He asked. Plans needed to be reconsidered. A strategy meeting was in order. 80,000 is a lot. But it is all you can eat, Gantz admitted, rubbing his chin. But if you subtract the breakfast cost, Melinda reasoned, it's basically 50,000 for the room. That's a good deal. She seemed eager. The hotel was clean, and she liked the idea of daily baths. In the end, Gantz and Treff couldn't resist the lure of endless food. Seal and Aesel were already beaming at the thought of staying somewhere this nice. Kite turned back to the skeleton and asked with a hopeful smile, any rooms still available? 21. Kite's sudden idea. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Kite's sudden idea. After finalizing the provisional hotel contract with the skeleton, Kite sat down in a corner of the restaurant to take a breather. During the day, the place functioned as a cafe, offering simple drinks and light desserts. With Melinda off to the baths and Gantz heading to the casino, he was finally alone for the first time in a while. Savoring the rare moment of peace, Kite's thoughts naturally drifted to how steadily more comfortable the dungeon had become. Honestly, it was so pleasant now. He felt more inclined to make this his real base than staying in Roderick. Still, there were times when returning to town was unavoidable. Selling off items recovered from dungeon dives, reporting to the guild. These were regular duties. After all, adventuring wasn't just about dungeon raids. Escort missions, material gathering, there were all sorts of jobs, and some paid quite well. To get those gigs, it was important to show your face at the guild and maintain ties with people. As that thought passed through his mind, a flicker of inspiration lit up. Wait a second. What if we just built a buyback counter here? It was about an hour's journey from town. If he pitched the idea to the guildmaster, they could set up a buyback station right at the dungeon. The dungeon had already become quite well known. And it wasn't that far off the main road either. Constructing a proper route wide enough for wagons wouldn't be too difficult, but even as the idea took shape, another thought struck him. No, just a buyback counter won't cut it. We'll need armor maintenance and supply sales too. Which means craftsmen and merchants. This is getting bigger. Currently, the dungeon didn't handle weapon sales, so any equipment upgrades required outside vendors. That meant bringing in blacksmiths and shopkeepers. But if that happened, it would be more than just a counter, it'd be a small town. A blacksmith shop needed proper facilities. Stores needed storefronts. And for the staff? They'd need housing. Kite leaned back in his chair, brow furrowed, then muttered. What if the guild opened a branch office here? With so many adventurers gathering already, it only made sense to establish a branch. The guild had already dispatched adventurers to maintain order, after all. If they staked out the area as official territory now, they'd be first in line for any future developments, and future profits. A guild-led settlement, built from the ground up. If they just invited the buyback merchants, smiths, and others under contract with the guild to set up shop, everything could fall into place. Negotiating directly with all the merchants was impossible for him alone, but if the guild got involved, it wasn't out of reach. This might actually work. It was the kind of idea that reeked of gold. Maybe it wasn't a typical adventurer's job to be thinking about this kind of thing, but Melinda had said it before. Kite might be more suited to planning and ideas like these. I should bring this up with the guildmaster. At the very least, it was worth considering. As his thoughts sharpened, he started piecing together how best to pitch it. Dungeon, deepest level, private quarters. While reading in my private room at the bottom of the dungeon, I yawned and stretched, just as someone knocked on the door. Come in, I called out. A snow-white skeleton entered, holding a ball of black fluff. My ever-loyal companion, Kerama, nestled in its arms. I've brought your report, the skeleton said, bowing slightly as it stepped inside. It brought me a compiled report on the casino's activity while I'd been resting. You brought it all the way here? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Normally, those were left in the monitoring room. Yes. I had something I wanted to discuss with you, it replied. But if I've interrupted your reading. The skeleton glanced at the book in my hand. Kerama wriggled slightly but stayed quiet. It's fine, I said, setting the book aside. Wasn't that interesting anyway? I just finished it. I'd picked it up hoping to learn more about this world's culture, but it turned out to be a simple fairy tale. It looks like a hefty tome, but it's just a children's story inside. May I ask what kind of story it was? The skeleton inquired politely. It probably wasn't that curious, but it was trying to be considerate. The usual sort, I said with a faint smile. A long time ago, there were two gods, one all-knowing, the other the god of creation. The omniscient God made the world, and the creator God made plants and animals. Together, they built a paradise and lived happily with humanity. I paused briefly. But, I continued, as always, two gods means trouble. The creator God started to resent having to live with humans and eventually picked a fight with the omniscient God. Their battle devastated the land, and paradise was lost. In the end, the omniscient God sealed the creator deep underground, but not before the creator hurled a divine spear made of god metal. It struck the omniscient God in the chest, killing him, I said, shaking my head. The creator was sealed away, and both gods disappeared. And so, humans were left to fend for themselves in a world where paradise no longer existed. I gave a little shrug. Pretty standard mythology, right? Stories with multiple gods rarely end well, I muttered. Though monotheistic ones are just as fishy, honestly. I had to watch myself though. The mainstream religion in this world worshipped the omniscient God, so openly mocking the faith wouldn't be wise. 22. The Zombie Sisters. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Zombie Sisters. It's been about a year now since I arrived in this world. Traffic to the dungeon hasn't slowed, income continues to hold steady at roughly 10,000 points per day. There haven't been any major issues at the casino either. Aside from 2 events I host each month, I haven't had to do much. Profits have plateaued, and there's not much room for further growth. One notable event recently, a neighboring dungeon was cleared out. Apparently, the influx of adventurers to my place caused the neighboring one to fall. I don't know who did it, but I can't help feeling slightly guilty about it. I thought it might result in fewer visitors here, but that didn't happen. On the contrary, it seems there's talk of building a town over the former dungeon site. From what I gather, People have started to see this place as a good home base. That's encouraging to hear. Other than that, well, I've recently taken to spending more time out on the casino floor. Not in person, of course. I'm not walking around in my actual body. I picked up a puppet-type monster that looks indistinguishable from a real human. I possess it and use that body to mingle with adventurers on the casino floor. It can't fight worth a damn, but the transformation ability was top-notch. It cost me 50,000 points, but it's been great for my mental health. Sure, I could have just spent time with Karama, but being cooped up in my room all the time was getting stifling. With this puppet body, I can walk freely around the casino. I've even gotten to know some people, adventurers who strike up conversation whenever they spot me. "Hey, Jake. How's your luck today?" As I was spinning the slots, a familiar voice called out to me. Jake is the alias I use in this body. My persona is a spoiled noble with money to burn. I've got a few other names and appearances I cycle through depending on who I feel like being. "Not bad," I replied smoothly, flashing the stacked tray of coins I'd won. The guy let out a whistle and looked genuinely impressed. "Still as lucky as ever, huh?" "It's all about knowing the trick," I replied with a knowing smile. "Total lie, of course. Karama rigs the machines in my favor." "You've got to teach me sometime." "Sure. Step 1 is, bring a mountain of cash. You want to win at gambling? You need serious capital. Say, about 1,000,000 Crocker should do it." "Don't be ridiculous. Who the hell has that kind of money? Not all of us are rich like you," he snapped, but it was all in good humor. "Then how about you treat me again sometime, huh?" Adventurers often came looking for a free meal or drink. I usually indulged them. "Sure, I don't mind. But only if you've got a good story to go with it." Winning at my own casino doesn't thrill me, it's rigged, after all. What I really enjoy are the stories the adventurers tell. Just the other day, I showered coins around after a big win and treated a crowd to drinks. I got a ton of stories in return. "I've got one for you," a man offered eagerly. "Ever heard of the 8 Great Dungeons? My grandpa used to delve the highest of them all, the Silver Dungeon." He puffed up with pride, but another guy standing nearby, eavesdropping, chuckled and jumped in. "Watch it, Jake. That guy's grandpa is a legendary liar. Says he beat a hero in a duel or something." "Shut it. Don't go bad-mouthing my grandpa. Besides, tall tales make better stories, right?" The guy didn't even believe his own grandfather, but if it's entertaining, I'm all ears, truth be damned. "All right, then I've got a story," said another man, grinning. "I heard there's a castle made of ice in the north, and a bottomless pit called the Jelbermore down south. Supposedly, it reaches all the way to the underworld. They say it was carved out when 2 gods fought during the Myth Wars, 1,000 years ago." "Myth Wars? Now that's obviously made up," the first guy scoffed. "I wouldn't dismiss it so quickly, though. Based on what I've heard and some ruins that have been uncovered, there's solid evidence that something massive did happen 1,000 years ago. Whether it was divine warfare or just a natural disaster is another matter." "Anything's fine," I said with a laugh. "If it's a good story, I'll treat you to a drink." "I'm no archaeologist. All that matters to me is whether the story is entertaining." "There might not be games or anime in this world, but it's rich in epic tales. Sky-piercing towers where gods dwell, world trees as tall as mountains. I don't know how much of it's true, but I love it all the same." "It's a shame I can't leave the dungeon myself. If I could, I'd go see those places with my own eyes." "How's it going, Jake?" This time, it was a female adventurer who called out. "Hey, Alessandra. You're looking stunning as always." "Such a flatterer," she replied with a playful smile. It was just a throwaway compliment, but women in Roderick have definitely been leveling up in the beauty department lately. "New nail color?" I asked, catching a glint from her fingertips. "You noticed? Took me forever to finally get my hands on it," she beamed. She'd spent a hefty chunk of her winnings to finally buy it, and she looked delighted. I'd recently introduced cosmetics as casino prizes. After some research and preparation, they'd become a hit, with female adventurers scrambling to collect them. Word spread quickly, even merchants came to shop for them. Thanks to that, the women in Roderick were getting seriously good at makeup. They looked completely transformed. It's been good business, and whenever I can, I make sure to throw in praise. A little encouragement keeps demand high. "Hey, want to grab a bite?" Alessandra slid her arm through mine as she invited me out to eat. Jake, my puppet persona, was surprisingly popular. Good looks, generous spending habits, and a noble backstory. He checked all the boxes. With that combination, women often made the first move. I appreciated it, really. But I had to turn her down. Getting too close was a bad idea. "Sure, sounds nice. But not tonight, I've already got plans with Mincha," I replied, putting on a regretful smile. "TCH, her again?" Alessandra huffed, yanking her arm back. "What's so great about that woman anyway?" And with that, she stomped off in a huff. For the record, Mincha was another one of my puppet disguises, also controlled by me. Not that I had any interest in cross-dressing or anything like that. I originally created her to research female preferences, but lately, she mostly served as a convenient excuse to reject invitations like this one. I'd been invited by plenty of female adventurers before, and I'd turned them all down. Even if I was using a different body, I was still a dungeon master. Getting involved with adventurers like that could only end badly, and more than that, I couldn't really enjoy it, not in the truest sense. While I could share sensory input with the puppet, it didn't feel quite like me. The realism just wasn't there. Plus, knowing my real body was stuck in the depths of a dungeon while I was out dining and chatting in someone else's skin, it made me feel ridiculous. That said, casual meals and light conversation were fun enough. I was definitely getting better at talking to women. Deciding I'd had enough for the day, I made my way back to the hotel. The room I'd rented under Jake's name was waiting. I entered and headed straight for the bathroom. Behind the toilet, there was a hidden door leading to a concealed room. And inside that room, a glowing teleportation circle, connecting directly to the dungeon's lowest level. Stepping onto the shining array, I was instantly transported back underground. As I exited the teleportation chamber, I found myself facing a small adjacent room. I opened the door and stepped into a plain white space, barely wide enough for 2 chairs. One was already occupied, by me. Well, by my real body, dressed in a crisp white shirt, slumped slightly as if asleep. This was the possession room. Whenever I controlled a skeleton or puppet monster, my consciousness would be transferred here, leaving my actual body vulnerable and unconscious. It was a risky setup, so I always made sure the switch happened in this secure place. "Possession, disengage," I murmured. Sitting down in the vacant chair, I cut the connection. My awareness flowed smoothly back into my real body. To my right, the playboy persona of Jake sat lifelessly. Blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, slender jawline, he looked like something out of a fantasy romance novel. Karama had designed the face, but honestly, it was too handsome. Every time I swapped back, it threw me off. Next time, I'd ask for something a bit more. I was about to head straight to the monitor room but took a quick detour to the prize inventory department. "Maria, got a minute?" I called, knocking on the door. "Come in, come in, come in." 3 voices responded in perfect unison. I stepped inside to find 3 women, pale-skinned and expressionless, waiting for me. Their faces were identical, impossible to tell apart, except for their hairstyles. Maria had short hair, Melia wore hers in a semi-long cut, and Arya had long flowing locks. Easy enough to distinguish once you knew the pattern. They were sisters, or so the setting went. The first female-type monsters I'd ever created. And just to clarify, their looks weren't based on my preferences. Karama designed their appearance, so I can't be blamed. That said, Karama does have good taste. "Hey, girls," I greeted casually. The 3 of them rose from their chairs in sync, lifted the hems of their black skirts, and gave a flawless curtsy. "Welcome, Master. Welcome, Master. Welcome, Master." Their timing was eerily perfect, gestures, tone, even pitch. They wore black Victorian-style made dresses, long and modest, with plain white aprons. That part was my taste. "How are things going?" I asked. "All operations are running smoothly. All operations are running smoothly. All operations are running smoothly." They responded in perfect unison, their voices flat and devoid of inflection. Their pale, clay-like skin showed no warmth, their lips were a cold purple, and their chests didn't rise or fall, they didn't breathe. These girls weren't alive. They were zombies, moving corpses, reanimated and obedient. How's the duplicator working? Everything on track with the product tree stocks. Behind them, a machine capable of duplicating items hummed away. It needed an original sample, but once that was provided, it could churn out replicas at a relatively low point cost. At the center of the room, a teleportation circle glowed faintly, linked directly to the prize exchange area next to the casino floor. Yes, no issues. Everything is proceeding as scheduled. Yes, no issues. Everything is proceeding as scheduled. Yes, no issues. Everything is proceeding as scheduled. Their triple response came like clockwork. While the dungeon core could technically duplicate items too, only I could operate it. That made it impractical for routine stock management, so I created these girls to handle it. They restocked as needed and used the teleportation array to send new items up to the exchange booth. When I said nothing, the three of them simply stared at me in silence. Their faces were beautiful, but the total lack of emotion made the staring uncomfortable. Honestly, I felt like I'd made a few mistakes with this project. Originally, I'd planned to use skeletons. They never complained, never needed rest, and could be made semi-intelligent with minimal cost. But I figured, if I was going to go to the trouble, I might as well have them develop new products too. The new cosmetics you added are doing well, I said, changing the subject. Keep it up. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. Their zombie girls replied in perfect monotone. I tasked them with developing products for female adventurers. I'd tried to make cosmetics before, but it never worked out. The problem was obvious. I'm a guy. I don't use makeup. Without someone who could apply and test it properly, of course it wasn't going to succeed. That's when I decided to make my first female-type monsters. But in doing so, I overlooked one crucial point. We never reconsidered the undead theme we were using as the base. So yeah, we ended up with zombie girls. The silence in the dungeon's lowest level was suffocating. Conversation with them was near impossible. But, well, it's not like they cared. Still, they're good girls. They work hard, never complain, never mess up a task. When I gave them prototype cosmetics to test, they didn't hesitate to give blunt, honest feedback. Thanks to that, our cosmetic development, which had been stagnating, finally took off. I'm pretty proud of the results. Lately, the girls had even started putting makeup on each other. They were constantly improving their skills. With the right makeup, even their undead features could be hidden. Dry, lifeless skin transformed into the soft, rosy look of a newborn. Their vacant eyes took on a mysterious allure, and their cracked lips turned into sensuous, sultry smiles. Honestly, the first time I saw them fully made up, I nearly gave in to temptation. It took everything I had to remind myself, they're zombies. Why did I have to make them undead? Every time I see them, I regret it. That said, maybe it's for the best. Getting involved with monsters I created wouldn't be right. This setup forces me to keep my impulses in check. Anyway, I'm counting on you three, I said, heading for the door. Understood, Master. Understood, Master. Understood, Master. Their emotionless voices followed me as I left the room and made my way toward the monitor chamber, where Karama was waiting. 23. Summons from the Grand 8. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Summons from the Grand 8. You've returned, Master. When I stepped into the monitor room, Karama turned its entire body toward me, its attention drifting away from the wall of monitors it had been facing. I had enough points saved up that I could have given Karama a humanoid body by now. But it always declined, insisting, this form is sufficient. If it was fine with it, I didn't want to press the issue, but still, wasn't it kind of inconvenient? While I was entertaining that thought, Karama straightened its posture and looked at me seriously. There is something I must discuss with you, Master. Huh, what's with the formal tone? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Congratulations, Master Madaram, it said, bowing respectfully. Today marks the 1-year anniversary since you became a dungeon master. Oh, really? Already a year? Huh. I'd suspected it was getting close, but I hadn't realized today was the exact day. To commemorate the anniversary, Kerama continued, I bring both good news and bad. Ha. That's the first time I've actually heard someone say that line out loud. Then let's begin with the good news. So I wasn't getting to choose. Fair enough. Having passed your first year as a dungeon master, you now have the right to access the Dungeon Society. The Society, it is a communal dungeon where dungeon masters can gather and interact. Only those who've survived a full year are granted access via a dedicated teleportation circle. The installation of this circle is free of charge, and I highly recommend it. I hadn't heard anything about this kind of gathering before. You're not told until you've made it a full year? Correct. Many dungeon masters don't survive their first year. Additionally, some veteran masters prey on newcomers. Withholding this information is a necessary precaution. That made sense. No doubt there were opportunists out there ready to feed newbies false information or trap them in shady deals. So, what can you do in this society? A wide variety of things, Kerama explained. Primarily, it serves as a social space for dungeon masters. You can pit your monsters against each other for wages, or trade and gift them as needed. So you could show off your monsters, or even buy new ones to bolster your forces. I didn't have many monsters in my dungeon, so it might not be super relevant to me. But if I played it right, I could probably earn some mana from it. You can also purchase property within the society grounds using mana. Several dungeon masters run businesses there, restaurants, service ventures, that sort of thing. Huh. So I could open a second casino dungeon there. No telling if other dungeon masters would be into gambling, but it wouldn't hurt to have an alternate source of income. Additionally, Kerama continued, you can borrow or lend mana. Prominent members of the society often act as lenders. They lend mana. Could I borrow some, too? It's possible. But not immediately. Loans require a strict screening process. Typically, you need to own land within the society or possess a dungeon of significant size. Collateral is also required. Fair enough, I said, nodding. What counts as collateral? Monsters? I frowned at the thought. What if the monster was destroyed? No, the dungeon itself is used as collateral, said Kerama. If repayment is delayed and enforcement is triggered, portions of your dungeon will be forcibly converted into mana and seized. Whoa, that's brutal. If parts of your dungeon were torn away, it'd probably be vulnerable to attacks. And if you went bankrupt, it'd basically be a death sentence. There have been cases where dungeons were overrun before loans could be collected, Kerama added. That's why lenders are very cautious. Also, the reclaimed mana only amounts to about 1/10 of the construction cost. In the worst case, you could lose nearly your entire dungeon. Please be cautious if you consider borrowing. Duly noted. After my last brush with debt, I really should tread carefully. As long as you're careful with those risks, I believe the society is a great opportunity, Kerama said warmly. Interacting with fellow masters could be a healthy change. You might even find friends, or a romantic partner. Yeah, that'd be nice. Romance between dungeon masters. Honestly, I was feeling lonely. Hanging out with Kerama wasn't bad, but I still wanted companionship. The kind only the opposite sex could offer. Chatting with adventurers was fun, sure, but anything beyond that was a line I couldn't cross. Getting intimate with someone I created, like one of my monsters, felt wrong. Even if they were guaranteed to obey, the idea didn't sit well with me. But another dungeon master? That was a whole different story. Equal footing. No strings, no imbalance. Just people. Yeah. That sounded nice. Are there other people like me? Other transferees? I asked. All dungeon masters are originally from other worlds, Kerama replied calmly. However, which world one connects from is random. It's unlikely you'll find someone from the same world or even the same era. In fact, you should be prepared to meet beings whose appearances differ drastically from your own. To you, many of them may seem more like monsters than fellow humans. So, no comrades. I had a feeling the odds were low. I hadn't come across anyone doing what I was doing, and now I knew why. Still, I muttered, folding my arms, it might be nice to meet them. More information's always good. And honestly, I'd like some playmates. There were still a few hundred years to go before the dungeon could be cleared. Friends would definitely help pass the time. Alright. Let's check it out right away, I said, a bit excited. I'm curious to see what kind of place it is. Please wait, Master, Karama interjected, its voice turning somber. There's still the bad news. Oh, right, I muttered, snapping my fingers. You mentioned that earlier. What's the bad news? A summons has arrived. A summons? Yes. You have been called to appear before a disciplinary committee. A disciplinary committee? I echoed, frowning. I'd just been parroting everything back lately. There has been a formal complaint filed against your dungeon's operations. The accusers are 8 dungeon masters, members of the Grand Eight. Great. I hadn't even made a single friend yet, and already I had enemies. The Grand Eight, the name referred to the 8 greatest dungeons in the world. Their depths were said to reach 100 floors, their defenses impenetrable. Countless adventurers had attempted them, few ever returned. But the treasures buried deep inside were legendary. Anyone who reached the lower levels and came back alive would be guaranteed fame and fortune. And what, exactly, are these Grand Eight lords picking a fight with me for? I hadn't done anything to provoke them. Hell, I'd never even met them. Why was I being dragged into this? What part of my dungeon is a problem? I demanded. Karama paused for a brief moment, its silence heavy. Right. I knew the answer already. I hadn't killed a single person. In terms of what a dungeon should be, mine was practically heresy. Still, it wasn't like I owed anyone an explanation. I suspect they take issue with your mana acquisition, Karama finally said. 10,000 mana a day. You achieved that within just 6 months. Looking at historical data, this is unprecedented. Out of the nearly 1,000 dungeons currently in existence, fewer than 50 generate more than 10,000 mana per day. Even among the Grand Eight, the top-ranked Silver Dungeon earns around 300,000 mana at its peak. Wait, even the top dungeons only get that much? 300,000 in a day. Sure, it sounded like a lot. But that was probably during a spike, when they took out some super powerful adventurer. The daily average would be more like half that. Meaning I wasn't that far off. Maybe 10 or 20 times behind them, max. So basically, I muttered, they can't stand that some upstart like me suddenly showed up. That would be a reasonable assumption. Figures. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. And here I am, not even growing anymore. I scratched the back of my head, annoyed. What a pain. So, when's this committee hearing happening? Tomorrow. That soon? What happens if I ignore it? The summons has binding force. If you do not go willingly, it will activate at the appointed time and forcibly teleport you. So they're not even giving me time to prepare. Yeah, that's what this was. They weren't going to give me a moment to get ready. Things were about to get busy. 24. The Grand Eight Disciplinary Hearing. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. The Grand Eight Disciplinary Hearing. The next day, I activated the teleportation talisman that came with the summons and was immediately transported, straight into what looked like a defendant's booth inside a courtroom. Wooden railings boxed me in on all sides, tall enough that I'd have to climb over to escape. Runes were etched into the wood, faintly glowing, obviously enchanted. From a raised platform above, 8 figures loomed, staring down at me with the sun behind them, their faces cloaked in shadow and authority. We will now begin the disciplinary hearing. Defendant, state your name, boomed a woman clad in gleaming white armor, her deep brown skin radiant even in silhouette. That must be Sylvana, I guessed, eyeing her. The name matched the intel I got from Karama. She was the top-ranking dungeon master, owner of the legendary Silver Dungeon. I glanced around the courtroom without answering. Defendant, state your name. Sylvana snapped, her voice sharper this time. I ignored her, turning to the tall man with glasses seated to my left. Our eyes met. Hey, I asked casually, who's the defendant supposed to be? You? Sylvana's flawless features cracked with fury. You, of course, Dungeon Master Madaram. Oh, so they already knew my name. Great. Still, I couldn't help but feel irritated. You're calling me a defendant. But I can't answer to that, I said evenly. because I haven't committed any crime. Is this some kind of joke? Barked one. Such insolence. Off with his head. How dare you speak so brazenly before us? The other voices surged like a tide of outrage. I ignored them. This is a disciplinary hearing, isn't it? I pointed out coolly. It's not a courtroom for punishing the guilty, it's to determine if there was a crime to begin with. My words sparked another round of angry shouting, but I didn't waver. This kind of posturing? I'd already seen it coming. They were trying to set the tone from the start, label me a criminal, trap me in their rhythm. The raised platform, the backlighting, the hostile glances, all theater, carefully crafted to assert dominance and rattle my confidence. They were trying to act like judges or kings, towering above me. But the truth was, we were equals. Sure, they'd been around longer. Sure, they'd earned more points. But that didn't give them the right to summon me like some servant. On paper, I was every bit their peer. I still don't even know why this hearing was called in the first place, I said, folding my arms. I've followed all the dungeon rules. Don't be absurd, Sylvana hissed. Forcing adventurers to pay exorbitant sums just to open a door. Your dungeon flies in the face of everything we stand for. So that's what this was about, as if such trickery could be allowed, growled another. It must be stopped at once. And to think, not a single adventurer has been killed in that dungeon yet? Unbelievable. The chorus of indignation returned. I held back a smirk. What are you even saying? I shot back. The dungeon rules are absolute. They can't be broken. As idiotic as the rules sometimes seemed, the system didn't let you circumvent them. If something was truly against the rules, you physically couldn't implement it. The fact that my setup had passed meant it was perfectly legal. And yet we do not approve, said the man with glasses from earlier, his tone flat. I don't need your approval, I said curtly. Gasps and murmurs broke out around the room. Do you honestly believe, bellowed a lizard-like man covered in dragon scales, that you can defy the Grand Eight and still survive and the society? That must be Dogaskara, the master of the Black Dragon Dungeon, known for brute force and bloodshed. You're right, I replied, not flinching. If I go against you guys, I'll be ostracized from the society. Because while dungeon masters were technically equals, the Grand Eight did hold real power. They ran the society in practice, managing its security, trade, entertainment, even loans and banking among dungeon masters. If they turned against someone, that person's days in the society were numbered. But me? I was different. It seems you understand your place, Dogaskara sneered. I do, I said with a nod. Which is exactly why I won't be using the society. From this day forward, I'll stay in my own dungeon until I've earned 100 billion points. I have no use for your little club. Silence fell. The eight exchanged startled glances as if I'd just spoken a foreign language. Probably because, to every other dungeon master, the idea of not using the society was unthinkable. But me? I didn't know this place. I hadn't grown attached. If I could never come back, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. They made their move too soon. If they'd waited, let me grow comfortable here, let me build relationships and dependencies, then maybe a summons like this would have worked. Maybe I'd have been cautious, polite, even scared. But dragging me here before I'd even gotten to enjoy the place? Now I had zero reason to play along. Their eyes darted and shifted. They weren't used to defiance, especially not from a newcomer. If I hadn't predicted what they'd say in advance, I might have been caught off guard too. Acting bold is fine, Dogaskara growled as he stood up, but do you really think you're walking out of here in one piece? I met his glare without flinching. Are you seriously planning to fight another dungeon master? I asked coolly. Besides, I thought dungeon masters were immortal. From what I'd learned, dungeon masters basically couldn't die. As long as the core remained intact, they regenerate, even if they were dismembered. Not that I ever wanted to put that to the test. That's your mistake, said a voice from the left, smooth and mocking. I turned to see the bespectacled man from earlier smirking. If Karima's intel was right, this guy was Maguire, master of the Venom Nest Dungeon, a specialist in poisons and traps. It's true we can't die, Maguire continued with a cold chuckle. But that doesn't mean he can't be made to suffer permanently. So, what? I said, arching an eyebrow. You're planning to imprison me. Don't be stupid. Torture, Togaskara snarled as he drew a grotesquely shaped sword, one that looked like it had been designed specifically to cause pain. So that was their game. If they couldn't win with logic, they resort to brute force. This so-called disciplinary hearing was nothing but a farce. Too bad for you, I said with a shrug. I'm not actually here in the flesh. This body's just a puppet, remote-controlled. There was no way in hell I'd show up physically. I'd predicted this kind of ambush and prepared multiple fail-safes. It had cost me a lot of sleep, but it was worth it. From the left came a burst of laughter. Maguire doubled over with amusement. Delighted by something. Of course we accounted for that, he said gleefully. Those railings around you? They're enchanted to block spiritual possession. Even if you try to sever the link and return to your real body, it won't work. Ah, good, I said, grinning at the monitor in my room. I was hoping you'd be that paranoid. Otherwise, this whole setup would have been a waste. Maguire blinked, caught off guard. You see, I continued, this isn't some simple spirit possession. I built a specialized magic device to remotely operate the puppet. My consciousness isn't here. Not even a fragment of it. Kerama was the one piloting my body. I was just sitting in a locked room, speaking into a mic, watching them through a screen. The safest place I could be. Sending a puppet, huh? Coward, Togaskara spat. Easy for the guy waving a torture blade to say. Honestly though, I was glad I hadn't come in person. Even now, with a monitor between us, I could feel the pressure these veterans were putting out. My nerves were fraying. But that was fine. So far, everything was going according to plan. If this was the extent of their hidden cards, they'd already lost the advantage. For all the Grand Eight's pomp and bravado, they were surprisingly shallow. I'd even brought contingencies like self-destruct spells and poison sacks. Looks like I wouldn't need them. And that meant one thing. This was my opening. If their best shot hadn't rattled me, I could outmaneuver them in a battle of wits. Time to push. Still, I said, my tone shifting, this one-sided antagonism isn't getting us anywhere. About that locked door of my dungeon. I could relax the entry conditions, if you agree to my terms. Their eyes narrowed in unison. My sudden offer caught them off guard. Terms? Togaskara thundered. You think you can negotiate with us? A rookie like you? I didn't bother pointing out that we were technically equals. From above, Sylvana gave me a long, scrutinizing look. Let's hear these. Terms, she said at last. I swallowed hard. Thank God for remote control. My real body was sweating bullets. Because what I was about to propose was all in. If it failed, I'd be ruined. But on the other side of that risk lay total victory. My chest burned. My throat dried out. It felt like swallowing fire. A thrill even the highest stakes gamble couldn't match. The kind of gamble that could only be played once in a lifetime. My condition is that we link our dungeons via teleportation circles, mine and each of yours. All 8, I declared. And with that, I finally laid my trump card on the table. 25. Madaram's proposal. Click me to read my NSFW novel projects. Love what I do? Help me keep doing it by making a donation for $1 or more through my Ko-fi. Madaram's proposal. Link our dungeons with teleportation circles. Sylvana, along with the rest of the Grand Eight, grimaced at the condition I had laid out. Is such a thing even possible? They exchanged uneasy glances as if I had just uttered something unthinkable, but it was possible. Kerama had confirmed it. It is. After all, this very society is a single dungeon. This place itself was a masterless, vacant dungeon. If it was possible to link my dungeon to this one, then logically, it should be possible to link other dungeons together as well. Of course, both parties must agree, I added smoothly. But if you all are willing, the connection can be made. Apparently, it was an idea no one had ever considered. Even Kerama had been stunned when I first brought it up. Ridiculous. Utter nonsense, Maguire said sharply as he adjusted his glasses, promptly dismissing the idea. Setting up teleportation circles to link dungeons, yes, it's a novel concept. But connecting them to your dungeon? Unthinkable. Though he showed interest in the technique itself, he firmly rejected my involvement. We are the Grand Eight, he added coldly. Our dungeons are on a completely different level from the one you cobbled together yesterday. He dares place himself on our level? One of them scoffed. The arrogance. Know your place, upstart. The others chimed in, emboldened by Maguire's disdain. I get it, I said calmly. Telling you to link your dungeons with someone you just met today, someone who even declared moments ago that he could walk away and never return, it's only natural you don't trust me. I gave a light shrug. Then how about this? I'll offer my core as collateral. The room collectively sucked in a breath. Do you even understand what you're saying? Togaskara's tone brimmed with restrained rage, the unspoken threat in his words clear. Say one more word of nonsense, and I'll cut you down. I understand perfectly, I replied, meeting his gaze. A dungeon core was the master's very self, the heart and soul of the dungeon. It wasn't something to gamble with lightly. This is me putting my life on the line. It was possible to borrow mana with the dungeon itself as collateral, but if you defaulted, the repossessed value would only be 1/10 of the dungeon's original construction cost. That meant small dungeons couldn't borrow much. However, if the core itself was pledged, the value skyrocketed. Even a dungeon on my scale could be assessed at around 300,000. But there was a catch. If repayment was delayed even slightly, the collateral would be seized, and the core's title could be sold off. Whoever bought it would effectively own me, and could shatter the core within the same day. I'll use my core as collateral to purchase land here in the society. How's that for a deal? The Grand Eight, who had been so united in opposition just moments ago, now looked at one another, visibly rattled. All that talk about standing and prestige was just that, talk. The real issue was pride. As the Grand Eight, they couldn't be seen accepting a newcomer's demands without conditions. But if I were to put up my core, their pride would remain intact. And once I purchased land here, I'd be bound to this place. I couldn't very well declare I'd never return after that. Not good enough, Sylvana said coldly, looking down her nose at me. Buying land with your core as collateral is meaningless if you can simply resell it and repurchase the rights. What's to stop you from asking other masters not to buy it? I countered smoothly. You eight do control the society, don't you? Surely it wouldn't be hard to discourage potential buyers. Yes, but what if you've already got dirt on other dungeon masters, blackmail material you could use to pressure someone into buying? Her voice dripped with suspicion. And to be honest, I wanted to say, that sounds more like something you would do. I'll have you know, this is my first time in the society. I don't even know any of the other masters, I said plainly. That may be true, Sylvana countered with a sharp look. But doesn't that make your proposal all the more suspicious? A bit off target, but surprisingly perceptive. Misdirection, pretending you don't have something in order to strike from the blind spot, is the foundation of any good swindle. In that case, how about I include a clause that forbids me from selling the land for 1 year? I offered, raising the stakes further. That should cover her earlier concern. And besides, purchasing land in the society comes with upkeep costs. Basically, a kind of property tax paid annually, meaning I'd be burdened on 2 fronts. This should satisfy you, I added with a slight shrug. That was everything I had to offer. All in. I'd thrown every chip I had onto the table. Sylvana looked down at me with cool detachment, her mind undoubtedly racing through numbers and scenarios. But it was pointless. The answer wasn't in the math, it had already been decided in her heart. Very well, she said at last, tilting her chin ever so slightly. Got you. To them, I was an insolent newcomer they desperately wanted to crush. But as I'd said earlier, I could easily walk away and never return. If that happened, they lose their chance at revenge forever. If they wanted to make their next move, they need me tethered to the society. And since I was offering up my core as collateral, I couldn't just cut ties and walk away. The terms I laid out aligned perfectly with their desire to keep me close. They pretended to be calculating, but their emotions had already made the decision. But where exactly do you plan to place the teleportation circle? Sylvana asked coolly. Don't tell me you want it right beside our cores, I replied. Nothing like that. I want it placed just beside each dungeon's entrance. I'll do the same, cluster everyone's teleportation circles near my own entrance. We can iron out the fine details later, but that's the general plan. And if we set up those circles, you'll reduce the conditions for unlocking your dungeon's inner door? That's right. Currently it costs about 200,000 coins for the pair. I'm willing to drop that down to around 1,000 coins total. I made it sound like a spontaneous offer. But truth be told, I'd discussed all of it with Karama beforehand. With conditions this generous, they wouldn't be able to refuse. Make it free, Togaskara growled. That, I can't do, I answered firmly. The door leading deeper into the dungeon can't have a laughably low price attached to it. Besides, 1,000 coins isn't much, it's an amount anyone could earn in 3 days. Here are the finer terms, I continued. The symbol to open the gate will only be issued as a single set. Once used or taken outside the dungeon, it vanishes and must be replenished. Also, no duplicate unlocking mechanisms will be installed. Only this one. Sylvana fell silent, then gave a slow nod. Fine. We accept those terms, Sylvana. Togaskara barked, clearly displeased. But she ignored him and finalized the agreement. The other 6 dungeon masters didn't object either. They probably assumed that with the entry fee reduced, my dungeon would be easily conquered. I didn't think that would happen, though. So, Sylvana said with a sharp look, you'll be easing the conditions starting today. Yes, of course, I replied, meeting her gaze. If you install the teleportation circle today, I'll relax the conditions today as well. If they were going to pressure me with conditions, I had every right to respond in kind. That said, convincing Togaskara would probably take a few days. Even without that, the land purchase and contract paperwork would need some time. I'd have to be ready before then. Well then, does that conclude this inquisition? I asked with a raised eyebrow. The members of the Grand Eight grimaced, clearly unwilling to admit it, but the deal was sealed. They had no choice now. Adjourned, Sylvana declared bitterly, bringing the hearing to a close.